Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Avila. Michelle Yvette Avila, people often call her Missy, was born on February 8, 1968, and grew up in Arleta, Los Angeles, with her mother and 3 brothers. She attended San Fernando High School, where she met her 2 best friends, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. Michelle and Karen's close relationship began in childhood, but the two grew distant during high school. Michelle was known for her beauty and impressive long hair, which made her popular and well-liked among her peer group. Karen and Laura began to feel jealous because Michelle received a great deal of attention from others, especially boys. During Michelle's sophomore year, a rumor began to spread that she had relationships with many boys, all of whom had their own girlfriends. This rumor angered a group of girls who confronted Michelle outside the school. They brutally attacked her when she returned home. As a result of this brutal act, her attackers were brought to justice. The leader of the group was reported to be Sonia Bon. Michelle's parents immediately reported the ringleader of the attack. Michelle was scheduled to testify in court on October 8, 1985, but unfortunately, she never made it to court. In early September, Michelle had an argument with Karen and Laura, 2 of her close friends. The conflict arose from a rumor that had been circulating for over a year, accusing Michelle of having an affair with the boyfriend of one of them. Michelle then began dating a man named Randy at the start of her junior year, but their relationship lasted only about a month before she decided to end it. The reason for the breakup was Randy's constant partying, which Michelle could no longer tolerate. However, after breaking up with Michelle, Randy began dating Karen, and the two even moved in together after just a month. Despite this, Randy seemed to still have feelings for Michelle, as he frequently flirted with her, which made Karen unhappy. Michelle rejected Randy and informed him that she did not want to rekindle their relationship. Wanting to help Karen, Michelle advised her to consider ending her relationship with Randy and finding a better boyfriend. However, this advice angered Karen. As a result, Karen and Laura started spreading rumors again and decided to confront Michelle at a local park. During the confrontation, Michelle tried to appease Karen and Laura, reminding them that a similar situation had occurred the previous year and that she would never deliberately hurt them. Karen had argued with Michelle 10 days before she was murdered. During that argument, Karen yelled at Michelle, threatened her with a broken beer bottle, and pushed her to the ground before leaving with Laura. However, Laura later apologized to Michelle, and the two set aside their differences to continue their friendship. Karen did not contact Michelle for a while, but on October 1st, she sincerely apologized for her earlier behavior. This meant a lot to Michelle because she missed her friends, so the 3 of them decided to meet up at Stonehurst Park later that day. On October 1st, 1985, Michelle told her mother that she planned to go out with her friends. After gaining her mother's approval, on the condition that she be home by 6 p.m., Michelle went outside to wait for Laura to pick her up. When Laura arrived, they drove around before deciding to stop at Stonehurst Park. After parking, they waited for Karen to arrive. A few minutes later, Karen pulled into the parking lot, with Eva, their other friend, in the passenger seat. That's when things got worse for Michelle. When Karen pulled into the parking lot, she stopped very close to Laura's car and began to get angry. She rolled down her window and started yelling at Laura, using vulgar and abusive language. Laura also rolled down her window and responded to Karen with equally harsh language. Michelle and Eva sat in silence, watching their friend DS argue heatedly. Michelle had no idea what they were arguing about. Suddenly, Karen backed up and sped out of the parking lot, with Laura following closely behind. For 45 minutes, they drove at a high pace north of the city and into the mountains. Karen and Laura were driving so furiously that Michelle and Eva had to beg them to calm down and stop. The two girls finally drove to a parking lot that led to a large forest. Laura and Karen got out of the car, and an argument broke out, which escalated into a physical fight. Michelle also got out of the car in an attempt to stop her friends. However, as Michelle left the car, Karen and Laura suddenly stopped fighting and turned towards her. They were so close to Michelle that she could neither get back into the car nor move away from it. Karen smiled at Michelle and said that she and Laura were not arguing and were not angry with each other, but instead, they were angry with her. They informed her that the whole drama was just a ruse to lure her into the woods so they could confront her and punish her. They yelled at Michelle, revealing that they were the ones who spread the rumor because they were convinced that she had slept with their boyfriends, and they would not let her get away with it. Michelle tried to plead and convince them, insisting that she would never do such a thing and that she had never had sex with anyone, but they refused to listen. When Michelle started to remain quiet, Karen and Laura grabbed her and pushed her down a path into the woods. Michelle was very small, only 4 feet 10 inches tall and weighing 95 pounds, while Karen was 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed over 200 pounds, and Laura was 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds. Michelle was unable to defend herself against them. Then they repeatedly forced her to go further down the trail. Eva, on the other hand, stayed in the car the whole time the altercation occurred. Eventually, she got out of the car and started walking behind the group. Eva had not participated in any of the girls' actions in the woods, and she did not even know why they were taking Michelle in the first place. As the group left the parking area and headed deeper into the woods, Laura stopped and confronted Michelle, who was crying helplessly and fearfully. Laura punched Michelle in the face, and Karen immediately joined in the beating. In a matter of seconds, Michelle was beaten, punched, and stomped, lying motionless on the ground. When the group stopped, Laura took a knife and cut off chunks of Michelle's hair. They did this intentionally because they knew Michelle loved her long, beautiful hair. Karen wanted to join in the cutting but didn't have a knife, so she simply pulled at each strand of hair with her hands. Eva stood and watched everything unfold. After they finished cutting, they tied Michelle's hands behind her back and gagged her. Since they were about 10 feet away from a river, Laura walked down to the stream, looked directly at Michelle, splashed the W. a tear, and began teasing her, asking her to get into the water with her. When Michelle refused to budge, Karen grabbed Michelle and pulled her up, then pushed Michelle towards the river, causing her to fall down. With her hands tied behind her back, Michelle's face hit the ground, and she rolled into the river. Laura and Karen had held her body under 8 inches of water. When Michelle suddenly broke free from Karen's grasp and lifted her head above water, Eva heard her scream. After Michelle screamed, Karen grabbed her head and pushed her under the water. When the girls realized that Michelle was almost drowning, they let her go and ran to a large log, then brought it over and placed it on Michelle's head. Laura and Karen grabbed her and pulled her into the water, forcing Eva to run back down the trail to the cars. When she reached the parking lot, Eva realized that both cars were locked and they were too far away to call for help. She was forced to start walking back down the trail. After a while, she heard a terrifying scream. She stopped, returned to the car, and lay down on the ground in a fetal position, waiting for about an hour for the girls to return. Finally, she saw Laura and Karen, soaked and smiling happily. However, Michelle was not with them. After leaving the woods, they got into the car with Eva and headed home. For hours after the ordeal, Laura called Michelle's mother and asked to speak with her. When Michelle's mother, Irene Avila, said she thought her daughter was with Laura, Laura claimed she had dropped Michelle off with 3 boys in a blue Camaro after getting gas. Laura stated that she returned to the spot where she had dropped Michelle off, but both Michelle and the 3 boys were gone. On October 4, 1985, Michelle's body was found face down in a stream in Big Topanga Canyon in the Angeles National Forest. 3 days later, a group of hikers contacted the police. When the police arrived, they discovered that Michelle had drowned in water only 8 inches deep. Her waist-length hair had been cut off, and a 4-foot-long log was found on her body. Police also found cigarettes, beer, and men's overalls near the location where Michelle's body was discovered. Detectives investigated the case based on the girl's statements that Michelle had been traveling with 3 men in a blue Camaro before she disappeared. This would explain some of the random items found around the crime scene. However, this statement led detectives to be misled and to search for men who did not exist for 3 years. Additionally, Irene later stated that she did not suspect Karen or Laura of being involved in her daughter's death, as both attended Michelle's funeral, and Laura even sent the family a condolence card along with $20. Karen moved in with Michelle's family for an extended period, showing her support and sympathy for them. She did her best to help catch the killers. In reality, however, Karen wanted to keep a close eye on the investigation and tried to avoid investigators as much as possible. Karen even slept in Michelle's bed and shared dinner with her family on several occasions. However, Karen was one of the girls responsible for Michelle's death. Karen also appeared to be haunted by the murder, visiting Michelle's grave several times a week and decorating her room with pictures of Michelle and newspaper articles about the case. She often went to the creek where Michelle's body was found. Once, Karen told Irene that she had seen Michelle's ghost. Detectives had no leads on the case until 3 years later, on July 26, 1988, when Eva drove 45 minutes into the mountains and turned herself into the police, revealing the entire story. She explained the rumors that had been circulating, the discord that had occurred among them, all the anger and jealousy, as well as every detail of the murder that she knew. Eva mentioned that it took her so long to come forward because Karen and Laura had threatened her, warning her not to say a word about anything she had seen, for fear they would kill her. In March 1990, Karen and Laura were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The jury later stated that they did not believe the murder was premeditated and dismissed the first-degree murder charge. Karen Severson was released on December 9, 2011, after serving 21.5 years, and Laura Doyle was released in December 2012 after serving 22 years. Karen Severson attempted to profit from writing a memoir about the murder and her life in prison, but her book did not sell well. She also appeared to have reached an agreement to make a movie about the murder, but Avila's family sued her in 2015, seeking to take profits from the sale of the work. As a result, the state of California passed Michelle's Law, which requires organizations that support the publication of works by criminals to contact the families of victims regarding such works. Michelle's story has sparked discussions about the effects of bullying, the complexities of teen relationships. Community initiatives and support networks have emerged to provide resources and support to those affected by similar experiences. As we remember Michelle, we honor her memory by working to create a world where friendships are built on trust and compassion. Her legacy serves as a reminder that every individual deserves respect, kindness, and the opportunity to live a life free from harm. Ultimately, Michelle Yvette "Missy" Avila's legacy will be one of courage and optimism. Hopefully, her memory will inspire us all to stand up against bullying, support those who have been betrayed, and work toward a future where understanding and empathy are prioritized. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Susan Wright. Susan Wright was born on April 24, 1976 in Houston, Texas. Her parents, Velma Sue and Jimmy Lawrence Wright, lived a simple life and raised Susan and her older sister, Cindy. From a young age, Susan was an active, friendly, and talented child. During her school years, she participated in dancing activities and aspired to become a professional choreographer. With her bright and attractive appearance, Susan had many fans. However, after graduating from high school, Susan's dream of becoming a student did not come true. But she did not give up, and after a short break, she saved money to continue her studies. For a long time, Susan worked as a dancer at a famous nightclub in the city. However, she soon realized that this job was not for her and decided to leave. She then used her savings to study nursing at night at a university. With the goal of becoming independent, Susan balanced her studies with a job as a waitress at a restaurant to support herself. However, after a while, Susan realized that a career in medicine was not the right path for her and paying for her tuition became difficult. Therefore, Susan decided to drop out of school and focus on her work. In 1997, Susan met Jeffrey Wright at the Galveston restaurant where she worked. She was 21 years old at the time and Jeffrey went to the restaurant for a meal. From then on, their romantic relationship began. Jeffrey was immediately attracted to the blue-eyed blonde's beauty and bright smile. He left a generous tip and became a regular customer. Finally, he mustered up the courage to ask for Susan's phone number. Susan recalls that Jeffrey began calling her every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Jeffrey arranged romantic dates and small surprises like sending flowers and touching notes to Susan's workplace. In the evenings, Jeffrey would meet her and take her home. Although Jeffrey was 8 years older than her, the age gap did not bother them. Jeffrey was attentive, sweet, and caring, and quickly won Susan's heart. However, Jeffrey had some problems with alcohol and substance abuse. Jeffrey said that he had given up drugs and promised to give up drinking completely. Susan, a naive young girl, believed him. Susan felt that together they could overcome any challenge. Shortly after Susan learned she was pregnant, she immediately shared the news with Jeffrey. Although Jeffrey initially expressed joy at the prospect of becoming a father, he had not made any decisions about the future. Jeffrey did not propose and they continued to live apart. Disturbed by Jeffrey's behavior, Susan insisted that their first child be born, and Jeffrey accepted her opinion. At the time of the marriage license, Susan was 8 months pregnant. Their wedding was a simple affair, with no guests or witnesses. A few weeks before the baby was due, they moved into a quiet house in Harris County, Texas. In December 1998, Susan gave birth to a son named Bradley. Just 3 years later, she was pregnant again. In the spring of 2002, she welcomed her second daughter, named Kay. Along the shore, the family also raised a small dog named Buck and had a spacious family car. Jeffrey worked for a local construction company, and after they had a daughter named Kay, Jeffrey agreed that Susan would stay home to care for the child. Friendly neighbors often praised Susan as a kind and caring mother. She created a cozy environment for the family. From the outside, it seemed like the perfect family. Every day, Susan has to spend a lot of time doing housework such as cleaning, organizing, cooking, and making sure everything is kept in a clean condition. Jeffrey does not want her to repeat the same recipes. The whole house has to be clean for Susan. Taking care of young children and cleaning the house at the same time can be considered impossible. Jeffrey's clothes have to be washed almost every day because he doesn't want to wear any of the same clothes again. However, following these rules manually is not easy. If Susan doesn't comply with his request, she will face insults, humiliation, and even physical abuse. Financially, Jeffrey is extremely frugal. Contrary to the image of a romantic man who often gives gifts and flowers, Jeffrey only gives Susan $100 a week to cover household expenses. At the same time, he also asked her to settle all expenses and provide receipts. Jeffrey also broke his earlier promise to quit drinking. However, the real problems were just beginning. Jeffrey relapsed and started using drugs again. Under the influence of these substances, Jeffrey would become aggressive and would hurt his wife and son. Whenever Susan asked Jeffrey to stop using drugs and go to rehab, Jeffrey responded with anger. Jeffrey saw no problem with his actions and believed that Susan knew about Jeffrey's drug and alcohol use before Susan married him, so she should accept it and live with it. Jeffrey's parents also knew their son's weakness and sympathized with Susan. However, they felt helpless and unable to help her. What Susan couldn't stand, however, was when her husband began to physically, emotionally, and even sexually abuse her. At first, he would apologize and promise not to do it again, but then he stopped apologizing and domestic violence became a daily occurrence. Jeffrey began boxing at the gym 3 times a week, finding that the sessions helped him relieve stress. On Monday, January 13, 2003, Jeffrey went to the gym after work as usual. When he returned home, he seemed stressed. While Susan was cooking dinner, Jeffrey decided to tell his son about the sport of boxing and teach him some basic techniques. While teaching his son boxing, Jeffrey lost control and hit the boy. The child burst into tears, and Jeffrey tried to comfort the child, hoping his wife wouldn't hear. Susan pretended not to notice, but this incident was the last straw for Susan. After dinner, Susan went to put the children to bed while Jeffrey remained in the bedroom. When Susan entered the room, Jeffrey attacked her violently. Susan thought that Jeffrey was trying to kill her with a knife. However, she reacted and realized that Jeffrey did not have a knife in his hand. Susan decided to use her dancing skills to seduce Jeffrey and lower his guard. Susan entered the room in a short silk robe and performed the dance for her husband. Susan then proposed a game, which Jeffrey agreed to participate in. In this game, Susan used 3 reins to tie Jeffrey's right hand and right leg to the bed. Jeffrey's left leg was secured with a silk strip from her robe. While Jeffrey was tied up, Susan used her panties to spank him, forming part of the intimate game. Susan gently turned off the lights. Jeffrey was now bound hand and foot, and a gag was stuffed into his mouth. The dim candles were the only remaining light. Susan then moved the bubbling hot wax onto Jeffrey's chest. Susan then continued pouring the hot wax onto his genitals, and the pain quickly became unbearable. Jeffrey tried to free himself, tried to scream, but to no avail. Meanwhile, Susan continued to beat Jeffrey with a small, sharp knife she had taken from the kitchen. Susan started at the groin area, moving up and down, cutting Jeffrey's genitals, legs, stomach, chest, arms, neck, and face. At first, Susan moved slowly, complaining loudly with each slash, recounting the insults, humiliations, and abuse she had endured. Then Susan began to cry and stabbed faster and faster. Her actions showed that Susan was in a state of extreme despair and emotional turmoil. Susan could not stop even when Jeffrey showed no signs of life. Susan sat by the bed next to Jeffrey's body. However, after a few hours, Susan realized that the bedroom was covered in blood and she had to clean it up before morning. Susan carefully watched the window, making sure no neighbors were watching. At this point, Susan saw a hole in the backyard, which Jeffrey had dug over the weekend to build a fountain. Susan quickly moved Jeffrey's body from the bedroom to the yard, using a garden wheelbarrow to move it. Susan decided that the pool would be Jeffrey's final resting place. After calming down, Susan spent the rest of the day, before dawn, cleaning up the evidence of the attack. Susan had to wash the blood off the floors, walls, and carpets. The carpets had large stains that could not be removed. Susan added bleach to the stains, hoping that the chemicals would erase any traces of what had happened in the room. That morning, Susan called her husband's family in Austin, Texas, sobbing. Susan told them that her husband Jeffrey, while drinking and using drugs, had attacked Susan and their young son. Jeffrey then destroyed the house, spilling a bottle of bleach on the carpet before leaving, declaring that Jeffrey did not want to continue the marriage. When Jeffrey's parents heard that Jeffrey had been beating their son, they were shocked. They knew Jeffrey wasn't perfect, and they felt sorry for Susan. They offered to let Susan and the children stay at their house for a while, but Susan refused. Instead, Susan said she would file a police report and tell them everything that had happened in the family. Then, when Jeffrey suddenly went missing, Jeffrey's mother, Mrs. Wright, went to the police station to report the incident. Susan said Jeffrey had been violent towards Susan and the children. As a result, Susan had to file for a restraining order, which meant that Jeffrey would not be allowed near Susan and the children. When Susan filed for the restraining order, Susan presented evidence of her injuries, such as bruises and cuts on her arms. Susan said the injuries were caused by Jeffrey during a fight when he hit her with a key. Susan's children were also victims, especially Bradley, who was hit by his father and had minor bruises on his face. At first glance, the story told by Susan seemed plausible. Jeffrey, under the influence of alcohol and drugs, attacked Susan and her young son, after which Jeffrey became frightened and ran away. But over time, Jeffrey stopped communicating. And Jeffrey fled without taking his belongings, papers, and even his cell phone from home. Jeffrey did not go to work or to his parents' house, and none of his friends or neighbors saw Jeffrey. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Susan's situation is not optimistic, as she finds it unbearable to be in the house where Susan murdered Jeffrey and buried his body in the yard. Susan begins to feel as if Jeffrey is still alive and about to rise from the grave to take revenge. Susan is on the verge of going crazy, and their dog Buck keeps barking and trying to dig up the burial site. On January 17th, after dropping her children off at school, Susan went to her mother Velma's house. Her mother learned about the incident and asked Susan, "You killed your husband, didn't you?" Susan burst into tears and nodded. Susan confessed what had happened and revealed where Susan had hidden Jeffrey's body, saying she didn't know what to do next. On her mother's advice, Susan contacted attorney Neil Davis the next day and confessed that Susan had killed her husband. Attorney Davis worked out a solution and thought carefully about possible scenarios. On January 19th, Neil Davis called the Harris County District Attorney's office and reported that Susan Wright had killed her husband Jeffrey and buried his body in the backyard. Susan Wright was ready to give a statement to the police. On January 24, 2003, Susan voluntarily went to the police and stated that she would give a full confession. On January 24, 2003, Susan went to the police and confessed the whole thing. However, when she was interviewed, Susan's story was unclear and full of contradictions. Susan was confused about the details and sometimes contradicted herself. Susan also claimed that Jeffrey was still alive and that she was afraid of him. As a result, Susan requested protection. As a result, Susan underwent a psychological evaluation and was diagnosed with schizophrenia and depression. However, Susan was still able to understand her actions. Following Susan's statement, the police arrived at the scene and removed Jeffrey's body from the makeshift grave in the backyard. The medical examiner was surprised to see numerous injuries on the body. The medical examiner's team counted a total of 193 stab wounds on the body. Specifically, there were 8 wounds in the groin area, about 30 wounds in the legs, 23 wounds in the shoulders and arms, 22 wounds in the abdomen, 46 wounds in the arms, 23 wounds in the neck, and 41 wounds in the face. However, only 1 wound to the head could be considered the direct cause of death. All other cuts were superficial and did not pose an immediate threat to life. This left Jeffrey with a long and painful death. Police saw deep marks on Jeffrey's wrists and ankles from the ropes and belt Susan used to restrain him. These injuries indicated that Jeffrey had tried to free himself but was unsuccessful. Additionally, traces of candle wax were found on Jeffrey's gun and groin area. Susan claimed that it was an accident as her husband accidentally turned a burning candle on himself, but police believe the hot wax was more likely a form of torture inflicted on Jeffrey to cause pain. Susan's underwear was still in Jeffrey's mouth, acting as a gag to prevent Jeffrey from screaming or calling for help. Toxicology reports revealed traces of alcohol and several controlled substances in Jeffrey's system, suggesting that Jeffrey may have acted aggressively under the influence of these substances. The bedroom where the massacre took place appeared normal, except for a large bleach stain on the carpet, suggesting that Susan had spent a lot of time cleaning and hiding the evidence. When experts used chemicals and special equipment to detect the blood traces that had been cleaned up, a completely different view of the project emerged. Blood was found everywhere, including on the ceiling and the red blood cell cushion. The trial began in late February 2004. By that time, Susan had been in custody for a year and her children were in the care of her parents and sister Cindy. Susan's attorney had prepared extensively for the trial and worked extensively with Susan. When questioned, Susan recounted the sad story of that terrible night and the events leading up to it. Susan said she had endured years of abuse and resistance. However, when Jeffrey began abusing the children, Susan could not take it anymore. Susan recounted that fateful evening, Jeffrey came home from the gym in a state of agitation. Jeffrey then began teaching their 5-year-old son punching and fighting techniques. When the son became scared and refused, Jeffrey punched him in the face. Susan then put the child to bed and decided to talk to Jeffrey about seeking help at a clinic for alcohol and drug abuse. However, Jeffrey became angry and decided to leave, taking the keys with him. While Susan tried to stop Jeffrey, a fight broke out between the two, leaving Susan with injuries to her palm and wrist. During the attack, Jeffrey attacked her, causing her to fall to the floor and briefly lose consciousness. When Susan regained consciousness, she found Jeffrey holding a knife in his hand. Susan could not explain how the knife ended up in her hand afterward. Susan's attorney argued that Susan's mental instability was the cause of her actions, causing Susan to lose control of her attacks until she had inflicted multiple injuries on Jeffrey. Susan said she tied the rope and belt around Jeffrey's hands after inflicting multiple injuries, then used a wheelbarrow to carry Jeffrey out into the yard. As for the scraps found, Susan claimed they came from a candle that Susan had left on her bedside table that night when she had left the nightlight on. Susan could not explain why her underwear appeared in Jeffrey's mouth. The prosecution's argument and conclusion were more convincing and reasonable. Experts demonstrated that the deep wounds and abrasions on Jeffrey's wrists and ankles were inflicted while he was still alive, indicating that the binding was part of an intimate game that Susan used to lure Jeffrey into a trap. Therefore, it was reasonable that Susan's underwear had replaced the gag in Jeffrey's mouth. Furthermore, all of the wounds were inflicted at a certain angle, as if Susan were on top of Jeffrey's body, sitting on him, rather than in the midst of a struggle, which would have resulted in a different type of injury. All of the cuts were made from the front while Jeffrey was lying on his back and firmly immobilized. The question remains whether Susan planned Jeffrey's death. The prosecution claims that Susan planned the whole thing in hopes of receiving a large insurance payout. The case was widely publicized as Susan was dubbed the Blue-Eyed Butcher or the Blonde Meat Grinder by the press. Jeffrey's relatives demanded the harshest punishment for Susan. At first, people asked for a life sentence for Susan. However, in March 2004, Susan was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Susan did not think about the judge's decision and was completely emotionless. A year later, Susan's attorneys attempted to appeal the conviction, but it was denied. With new developments and a reduced sentence in 2008, Susan and her defense team filed another appeal. This time, a new witness testimony significantly affected the outcome of the case. Misty McKell, wife of former NFL champion Steve McKell, had a close relationship with Jeffrey Wright in the mid-1990s and was even engaged to Jeffrey for a year. However, Misty McKell shared horrific experiences of being physically and mentally abused by Jeffrey, causing her to abandon plans for marriage and end the relationship permanently. After considering Misty McKell's testimony, Susan's sentence was reduced to 20 years. In 2014, when she was 38 years old, Susan was eligible for parole once but was denied. Susan was also denied a second time in July 2017. Finally, after 16 years in prison, Susan was released in the winter of 2020, when she was 44 years old. Susan Wright's case was widely covered in the media and aired on the U.S. national television network Court TV. The story was later made into several popular television documentaries, including 48 Hours Mystery and The Secret Lives of Stepford Wives. In 2012, the feature film Blue-Eyed Butcher was released, starring actress Sarah Paxton as Susan Wright. Additionally, in 2014, Canadian documentary filmmaker Chloe Ballant discovered a short film inspired by Susan Wright's trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts was born in September 1984 in northwest England, where she was raised in a traditional and devoutly religious family. She was the younger of two daughters and was raised with strong Christian values. She attended a Christian school, where she also developed her musical talents and sang in the choir. Those who knew Vicki described her as a kind, friendly, and helpful person who was always willing to lend a hand. After completing high school, Vicki enrolled in university and took a part-time job at an IKEA store to support herself. It was there that she met Michael Roberts, and their initial friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Michael was only a year older than her. Like Vicki, Michael balanced his studies with a part-time job at IKEA and made time for sports. He was also careful about his appearance and made a good impression on those around him. Vicki was initially put off by Michael's bold and outgoing personality, but she soon found herself developing strong romantic feelings for him. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a family of modest means. His father was a successful chemical engineer who expected a lot from his two sons, particularly Michael, the eldest. As a result, Michael grew up with high ambitions and a strong sense of purpose. He was a diligent student and developed into a driven and accomplished individual. Michael was a social butterfly with many friends and was often the life of the party. However, he took the most pride on the love front. With his good looks, sense of humor, and charming personality, Michael was a catch. He was also intelligent and well-read, able to hold his own in conversations on a wide range of topics. Michael's parents had instilled in him the idea that he was exceptional, praising his intelligence, beauty, and potential for success. However, this upbringing may have also fostered narcissistic tendencies. Despite this, Michael felt a deep-seated need to live up to his parents' expectations and be the perfect son, driving him to strive for their approval. Michael had a series of brief relationships and frequently dated multiple people simultaneously. He was confident in his charm and enjoyed the thrill of pursuing women who seemed out of his reach. For Michael, this was a game, a challenge to be won. Vicki is one of the challenges he wants to conquer. She was a modest and unattainable woman who initially kept Michael at arm's length, refusing even casual invitations. Vicki was focused on her studies and spent her free time at church, leaving little room for dating or relationships. Michael, however, was determined to win her over. It took Michael a few months to win Vicki over, but eventually she agreed to go out with him. He had charmed her with his sweet gestures, flowers, gifts, and thoughtful surprises. He even invited her to meet his parents, who immediately took a liking to her and approved of their son's choice. Vicky was convinced that Michael was genuinely interested in her, so she gave in to his advances. He became her first serious partner, and she felt truly happy when she was with him. It seemed like fate had brought them together. Michael also appeared to be in love and ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, their relationship seemed perfect. They were both young, attractive, and full of energy and ambition, with big plans for the future. Vicky soon discovered that Michael had a strong and adventurous approach to sex, with a high sex drive and a desire to try new things in the bedroom. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicky to engage in certain activities, fearing she would leave him. However, once he felt secure in their relationship, he revealed his true desires. Vicky, a modest and religious person, was shocked but deeply in love with Michael and trusted him, keeping their private life a secret. Things took a turn when Michael proposed to Vicky, and she happily accepted, believing that marriage would bring an end to his experimental behavior. However, her closest friend began to notice Vicky covering up bruises and marks under her clothes. When confronted by her friend, Vicky initially denied any wrongdoing by Michael but eventually confessed that the marks were a result of Michael's affinity for bondage, toys, and other devices during their intimate moments. Vicky confided in her friend that she and Michael had intimate relations up to 5 times a week. Michael considered himself a skilled lover, viewing intimacy as an art form and the means of self-expression. Although he would occasionally compromise when Vicky refused to participate in his more extreme and reckless experiments, he usually managed to persuade her to give in to his desires. After graduating, Vicky became pregnant unexpectedly and decided to change careers. She soon landed a job as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left his job at IKEA and became a sales consultant at a large electronics retailer, selling phones, laptops, and other gadgets. Thanks to his charisma and persuasive abilities, he consistently exceeded his sales targets and quickly became one of the top-performing employees. Michael's success led to a promotion to senior sales, and he was being considered for a transfer to the company's main office. However, he needed to undergo additional training to improve his qualifications first. Michael enjoyed the training sessions and business trips to London, and he took great pride in his accomplishments. As a result, he often forgot about Vicky, his young fiancée, and only remembered her when he wanted intimacy. Vicky and Michael's relationship was lacking in several ways. They rarely spoke about each other or spent time together outside of the bedroom, making Vicky feel invisible to him. Meanwhile, Michael was secretly having affairs with coworkers, clients, and casual acquaintances. During this time, Vicky discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with Michael, expecting him to be thrilled and expedite their wedding plans. Instead, he was furious and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, citing their youth and the fact that they had their whole lives ahead of them. Vicky was shocked and refused to consider abortion. Michael then attempted to persuade Vicky by appealing to her concerns about her family. He claimed that her parents, who were deeply religious, would be angry and disappointed in her for becoming pregnant out of wedlock. However, Michael promised that if Vicky agreed to have an abortion, they could keep and plan to have children after they were married. Vicky was faced with a tough decision, but Michael's persistence eventually won her over, and she went to the hospital. Unfortunately, the experience was complicated, and Vicky had to stay in the hospital for a few days. It took her nearly 3 weeks to recover. During this time, her doctor strictly advised her against intimate relationships. When Michael found out, he became furious. It was then that Vicky realized Michael had mental health issues and an addiction to sex. Without intimacy, he became unbearable, frequently leaving the house, citing urgent work matters. Vicky suspects Michael is having an affair, and she hoped that getting married would help him change his ways and be more committed to their relationship. As it turned out, their relationship was loveless, and Michael was leading a double life. Their 2-year engagement was just a convenient arrangement for him, as he had a loyal partner waiting for him at home, taking care of the household, while he maintained a string of mistresses on the side, which he frequently replaced. Vicky always trusted Michael and forgave him whenever he cheated, as long as he promised it wouldn't happen again. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael into getting married, as she wanted to start a family and have children. Her parents also brought up the topic frequently, but what really pushed Michael to consider marriage was the insistence of his own parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Michael's parents adored Vicky, thinking she was perfect for their son. They constantly asked and they would tie the knot and give them grandchildren. With the help of his parents, Michael and Vicky organized a grand wedding, complete with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful ceremony. The newlyweds appeared to be in love and happy, with a long life ahead of them. After the wedding, they settled into a large, cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, close to Michael's parents. Despite their marriage, Michael didn't truly love Vicky. It was more of a way to appear normal to others. Vicky never expressed her concerns about Michael's unusual behavior and frequent infidelity, allowing him to freely change partners. Meanwhile, Michael's career was thriving. He received a promotion and a significant salary increase after being transferred to a new office. His direct supervisor was Carrie Hall, the head of administration at Phones for You. Carrie was a decade older than Michael, divorced, and raising her son independently. Despite her tough exterior, she was attractive, well put together, and strong-willed, as her position demanded. For a while, she ignored Michael's subtle advances, but to him, her indifference was a signal to take action. Michael set out to win over Carrie, using his natural charm and eloquence to capture her attention. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated his interest, and they began a regular affair, meeting in hotel rooms. Their relationship was intense and passionate, with a focus on experimentation and exploration. Carrie, a confident and mature woman, was flattered by the attention of the younger Michael. She was aware that Michael was unlikely to end his marriage for her. Michael, on the other hand, was eager to explore his desires with Carrie, which he felt he couldn't express with his wife. He would often lie to his wife about working late or attending corporate events, while confiding in Carrie about his unhappy marriage and his desire to divorce. However, he never made any concrete moves to end his marriage. The affair lasted for over a year, with Carrie seemingly content with the arrangement. She made no demands from Michael to leave his wife and was satisfied with their clandestine meetings and the excitement they brought. Carrie's behavior changed as she started dressing more conservatively, covering her body with long sleeves and high-necked clothing, a departure from her usual style that highlighted her athletic build. Carrie confided in her close friend about her lover Michael's extreme intimate experiments, which often crossed a line. She showed her friend the evidence, a bite mark on her chest and bruises on her neck from his intense grip. There were also marks on her wrists from the ropes he used to tie her up, giving him complete control. The friend was alarmed and urged Carrie to report the incidents to the police, but Carrie refused, explaining that the acts were consensual and Michael usually warned her about what he was going to do. However, the intensity of the experiences often got out of hand. For instance, Michael enjoyed choking his partner, claiming it would enhance the experience, but there were times when Carrie lost consciousness due to his excessive enthusiasm. Carrie's friend was fearful of Michael's strangulation games, but Carrie consistently gave in to his persuasion, believing that he would eventually stop or that she would become desensitized to the experience. Sadly, neither Carrie nor any of Michael's mistresses made any attempt to stop his cruel and painful experiments. Vicky had suspicions about her Michael's infidelity even before they got married. She believed that her love and care could change him and make him a devoted family man. However, after the wedding, his cheating continued and even worsened. When Michael denied his infidelity, Vicky decided to investigate on her own. One night, while Michael was asleep, Vicky checked his phone and found numerous intimate conversations with other women, including Carrie. She was shocked to discover that Michael had exchanged explicit photos with some of these women. The discovery was devastating for Vicky, and she packed her bags and temporarily moved in with a friend. Vicky kept her situation a secret from her family, fearing their reaction. She was afraid that her religious relatives would pressure her to get a divorce if they found out about Michael's adultery. Despite her heartbreak, Vicky still loved Michael and didn't want to give up on their marriage. Before leaving, she wrote him a heartfelt letter, confessing her love and telling him that he was the most important person in her life. Michael's wife had finally had enough of his promiscuous and decided to leave him. Before she went, she wrote him a handwritten note explaining that she knew about his cheating and couldn't take it anymore. She left the note on the refrigerator and gave him time to think about his actions, but made it clear that she wouldn't file for divorce just yet. Despite his wife's departure, Michael didn't seem to be particularly upset or remorseful. However, he did realize that he would miss having a quiet and submissive partner who took care of the household and tolerated his behavior. He decided to try to win her back and followed her to her friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He apologized and begged her to return, promising to be faithful from then on. His wife, Vicky, wanted to believe him and decided to give him another chance. For a while, Michael made an effort to be more considerate and even came home for dinner. He deleted his correspondence with his mistress, Carrie, and changed his social media password to avoid suspicion. However, Michael's good behavior didn't last long. He soon started pursuing a new female employee, Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite her initial reluctance, Michael persisted in his pursuit of her, and they began an affair. Meanwhile, he continued to see Carrie on the side, juggling multiple relationships at once. He became infatuated with a new woman and ended his relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall after 2 months, as he had grown tired of her. He told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and claimed he was willing to leave his wife for her. Karen believed him, and they had an intimate encounter in the office. A week later, she ended her engagement, expecting Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael had no intention of divorcing his wife, Vicky, but he wanted to keep his new mistress. To keep her happy, he lied to her, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and was living with his parents. However, Vicky soon became suspicious that Michael was still cheating on her. She decided to take action and gathered evidence of his adultery. While Michael was in the shower, Vicky took his phone but found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all his text messages and changed his social media password. Undeterred, she waited until he fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she found his social media account still logged in. There, she discovered messages between Michael and his new girlfriend, in which he professed his love and claimed to be divorcing Vicky and living with his parents. Vicky was shocked and took screenshots of the messages as proof of Michael's infidelity. She also found receipts for hotel rooms in his wallet. The next morning, she confronted Michael, presenting him with the evidence adultery. For the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael was taken aback and tried to apologize, promising it would never happen again. However, Vicky threatened to tell his parents about his infidelity, hoping they could talk some sense into him since she couldn't. Michael was enraged by his wife Vicky's threat to tell his parents about their problems. In a fit of anger, he slapped her. Vicky then got up and said she would go to his parents immediately, heading for the door. Michael caught up to her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dresser, and hit her in the head twice, knocking her unconscious. He then strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. Feeling no remorse, Michael wrapped Vicky's body in a blanket, placed it in large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He quickly cleaned the house, packed up most of Vicky's belongings, and removed them. He then invited his lover, Karen, over, and they had dinner, had fun, and made love in the same bedroom where the murder had taken place. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen. He told his parents that Vicky had left him for another man, even showing them fake messages from Vicky's phone, which he had sent himself. He went to his parents' home, sobbing on his mother's shoulder, pretending to be distraught over his wife's supposed infidelity. Michael sent his parents-in-law messages saying that their daughter had left him for another man. He also told them to give her space and not to bother her. The messages claimed that Vicky had fallen out of love with Michael and had moved in with someone else. Her parents were shocked and tried to contact Vicky to hear her side of the story, but she refused to answer their calls, only responding with messages asking for time. Vicky's parents found Michael's story suspicious and went to his house to confront him. However, his explanation only raised more questions. They soon discovered that Vicky had not shown up for work, which further alarmed them. They decided to report their concerns to the police, leading to an investigation. On December 1, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, rope, rags, and cleaning supplies from a hardware store. However, the police arrived at his house on the same day. He had been caught before he could dispose of a body. The police initially found nothing out of the ordinary, but Michael's actions and alibi sparked suspicion and raised several questions. Notably, they overlooked a large package in the garage during their search. Inside the house, they found no signs of her presence, such as clothes, documents, or personal items, which could suggest she had left of her own accord. However, Vicky's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's incriminating conversations with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The investigation took a significant turn when authorities made a geolocation request to Vicky's cell phone, which had been regularly sending messages to her husband and relatives. To everyone's surprise, the phone was found to be located in the marital home of Vicky and Michael. This led to a second, more thorough search of the Roberts residence. During this search, a suspicious package was discovered in the garage, and its contents shocked all who were present. However, in a stunning twist, Michael, who had been cooperating with the police, suddenly vanished into thin air. He had taken a wallet containing cash, which allowed him to evade capture for several days. After his money ran out, Michael turned to one of his mistresses, Lisa T, and asked if he could stay with her for a while. However, when Lisa heard on the news that Michael was wanted for his wife's murder, she immediately contacted the police and reported his whereabouts. Eventually, he was arrested, put on trial, and convicted. When the authorities arrived to arrest Michael, he claiming he was innocent of the crime. A man claimed that his wife died accidentally during a consensual sex game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he lost control. However, forensic experts disputed this claim, finding that she was actually strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 severe head injuries that occurred before her death, which were unrelated to the alleged sex game. The trial began in January 2010, with the defendant, Michael Roberts, maintaining that his wife's death was an accident and hoping for a lenient sentence. However, the autopsy results revealed a different story. Roberts had intentionally hit his wife on the head twice, then strangled her, and hidden her body in the garage. As a result, Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marcos Matsunaga. Marcos Matsunaga was a successful Brazilian entrepreneur who inherited a family business that became one of the largest food product companies in the country. The company, Yoki, was founded by his grandfather, Yashizo Cadano, who immigrated to Brazil and started a small flour milling business in the mid-20th century. Over time, the company grew and transformed into a global brand with a wide range of products. Marcos was born into a wealthy family and was accustomed to getting everything he wanted from a young age. Marcos didn't have to start from scratch to build his business, as he inherited the family food company from his grandfather and father. As the CEO, Marcos had the opportunity to become the first billionaire in his family, a goal he pursued for most of his life. However, this ambition was not meant to be fulfilled. Those who knew Marcos personally described him as a skilled and successful businessman who not only preserved but also significantly increased the family's wealth, boosting profits. However, he was also known for being difficult to work with, having a strong personality, and being controlling towards those around him. Marcos was not handsome, he was obese since childhood. He had to wear glasses due to vision problems, short stature, and somewhat clumsy. All of these caused Marcos a lot of problems when communicating with friends, leading to a lack of friends and isolation. Despite his wealth and business success, Marcos found it difficult to establish a meaningful relationship. His arrogance and egoism often repelled women, making it hard for him to connect with someone beyond a few dates. Consequently, he frequently relied on the services of escorts, as his wealth and status were not enough to make him a desirable partner. Very little information is publicly available about the entrepreneur's first wife. What is known is that their marriage was not based on romance or passion, but rather necessity and family pressure. The marriage endured for several years, although both spouses soon came to regret their decision to start a family. Initially, the young wife tried to accommodate her husband's complicated personality, hoping they would eventually form a supportive and loving partnership. However, her expectations were unfulfilled, and they gradually grew further apart. The businessmen primarily sought companionship on websites where women offered intimate services in exchange for money. Elise was one of these women, a call girl with profiles on multiple platforms. He came across her profile, a gorgeous blonde with a great figure, and began booking her services regularly, paying her handsomely for their time together. Elise was 6 years younger than him. She grew up in a poor and troubled home in a crime-ridden part of the city. Her family life was unstable, she never knew her father, her mother struggled with addiction, and her mother's partners often had similar issues. As a result, Elisa's childhood was marked by hardship and unhappiness. She was frequently beaten, harassed, and abused by her mother's partners from a young age. As soon as she finished school, Elise left home and never looked back. She pursued a career in nursing, landing a job at a hospice after completing her training. However, she soon realized that caring for terminally ill patients was not her true calling. Elise formed strong bonds with her patients. A few years later, Elise decided to pursue higher education and switch careers. She chose law, which she saw as a promising field that would open doors to new opportunities. After lengthy preparation, she scored well enough on the entrance exams to gain admission. However, she struggled to pay tuition fees with her limited income as a nurse. Since Elise had no family support, having cut off ties with her relatives after leaving home, she had to fend for herself. To make money, she decided to take advantage of her appearance. She registered on a website that provided intimate services, where she was helped to create an attractive profile. Soon, wealthy customers began to notice Elisa's beauty. Elise worked as an escort to finance her studies and support herself. Once she completed her education and secured a job in her field, she planned to leave the sex work industry. That's when she met Marcos, a regular client who showered her with gifts and openly met with her. Unbeknownst to Elise, their relationship would take a dramatic turn. Marcos, a wealthy married man, would eventually leave his wife for Elise, transforming her rags-to-riches story into a real-life fairy tale. Marcos completely lost himself over Elise, but it's unclear whether Elise actively pursued him or not. After about 6 months, Marcos realized he didn't just want to date Elise, but to be with her long-term. Without hesitation, he filed for divorce from his first wife and began introducing Elise as his fiancée to everyone. Marcos, as a businessman, preferred to keep the true nature of their relationship and Eliza's occupation private. So, they came up with a cover story, claiming they met by chance at a cafe. They stuck to this story, even with Marcos's closest relatives and friends, who remained none the wiser. When Eliza joined the Matsunaga family, she didn't exactly receive a warm welcome. Her in-laws suspected that she had used her charm to win over Marcos, an older, wealthy, but not particularly attractive man. They believed she was now pretending to ignore his abrasive personality in order to secure her new status. Despite their reservations, no one strongly opposed Marcos's decision to divorce his first wife and marry Eliza. A lavish, traditional wedding was planned, complete with a white wedding dress, numerous guests, and a multi-tiered cake. Afterwards, Marcos moved his new wife into his grand, luxurious mansion, where she became the lady of the house. Matsunaga was a well-known collector of luxury items, particularly expensive wines and rare weapons. His house featured a large wine cellar, where bottles were meticulously organized by year and country of origin. Additionally, the house had a secret room dedicated to his collection of firearms and edged weapons, which were proudly displayed on the walls from floor to ceiling. Marcos took great pride in his extensive collections and was always on the lookout for new additions. His home was a treasure trove of antiques, luxury items, and modern art, which were displayed throughout the house, often in a way that was more cluttered than curated. Soon after the wedding, they decided that they were ready to have an heir, but despite all their efforts, Eliza did not get pregnant naturally. Then they decided to resort to the procedure of in vitro fertilization, but even here, success awaited them far from immediately. However, when their daughter was finally born, their joy knew no bounds. They devoted themselves to raising their child, making plans for her future, and as she grew older, the family began to travel the world, immersing themselves in different cultures and traditions. Their daughter was a beloved and pampered child, raised with love, care, and every luxury imaginable. When Eliza entered his life, she surprised him by showing a willingness to learn about hunting. Together, they visited shooting ranges, where she became proficient in handling firearms. Eventually, they ventured into the woods to hunt wild animals. Eliza approached hunting as a competitive challenge, unfazed by the act of taking animal lives. Marcos appreciated her mindset and enjoyed watching her skillfully wield her weapons and stalk prey. Marcos taught Eliza various outdoor skills, including how to skin and carve wild animals such as boars, deer, and other forest creatures. Together, they would dissect the animals using large knives, cleavers, and axes to separate the body parts. Unconventionally, the family did not keep traditional pets like cats or dogs. Instead, they kept poisonous snakes in specially designed terrariums that mimicked their natural habitats. This was a long-held dream of Marcos, who had a passion for snakes, but his first wife had never approved of the idea of having a terrarium in their home. Eliza had successfully adopted Marcos's unusual hobbies, which had grown on Eliza. In the spring of 2012, Marcos was on the verge of making a significant deal that would take his wealth and career to a new level, potentially making him a billionaire. He was in active negotiations with several partners to sell the family business and invest the substantial proceeds in a new and profitable venture. On May 19, 2012, the day before a billion-dollar deal was set to close, entrepreneur Marcos vanished without warning. His wife, Eliza, didn't report him missing until the next day because she thought he was at work. According to Eliza, Marcos had a meeting scheduled for the evening that was expected to run late into the night. He had packed some belongings and told her he would likely spend the night at the office before heading straight to the deal the next morning. When Marcos failed to return home and stopped answering his phone the next day, Eliza grew concerned and reported him missing. The police quickly discovered that the entrepreneur had missed an evening meeting and a crucial morning meeting that he couldn't afford to skip. This led to immediate speculation that the millionaire had been kidnapped, and it was likely that his family would receive ransom demands in the coming hours. However, 24 hours passed, followed by another day, with no ransom demands received. As a result, hopes of finding Marcos alive began to dwindle. Meanwhile, investigators were actively questioning the businessman's relatives, friends, and business partners to identify potential enemies and determine who could benefit from his disappearance or the disruption of the impending deal. Despite a thorough investigation, no one has found anyone who would have wanted to kill Marcos. He was a capable and forward-thinking businessman who made strategic decisions that often benefited everyone involved. Days later, Elise visited her in-laws with her daughter and revealed a secret she had been too afraid to share with the police. With tears in her eyes, she explained that her husband had been having an affair with a woman named Natasha Villalima and had made no effort to hide it. Although the situation had led to several heated arguments and threats of divorce, Marcos had eventually promised to end the affair in order to save their family. Marcos continued to see Natasha, but was more cautious to avoid another family scandal. However, Elise suspected he was having an affair and hired a private investigator to gather evidence. The investigator obtained photos and videos of Marcos's romantic dates with Natasha. Notably, he took Natasha to the same restaurants and entertainment venues that he and his wife frequented, where he was very popular. It seemed that Marcos was deliberately showing his disdain for his wife and openly cheating on her without any attempt to hide it. It was later discovered that Natasha Lima was found on the same intimate services website where Marcos first met his wife, Elise. They dated for about 5 months, during which time he showered her with expensive gifts, including a luxury car, and paid her a large sum of money to delete her online profile. Meanwhile, Elise discovered incriminating photos and videos of Marcos's infidelity and showed them to his parents. She also revealed that she had confronted Marcos with the evidence just a day before his disappearance, but instead of apologizing, he abruptly packed his things, informed Elise that he was leaving her, and disappeared without a word. According to Elise, Marcos had simply given in to his passion and abandoned his life to be with his new mistress. However, those who knew him best vehemently disagreed, insisting that Marcos would never abandon his business, which his family had spent decades building, as he was deeply invested in its success. A gruesome discovery was made by a passerby about a week later, when scattered garbage bags were found in a remote area approximately 100 kilometers from the missing Marcos's house. Upon examination of the bags, police discovered human remains which were identified as Marcos Matsuniga, a person for whom an extensive national search was ongoing. Forensic examination concluded the victim had died as a result of a shot to the head before the perpetrator cut and packaged his dismembered remains. Expert assessment also inferred that only an exceptionally skilled practitioner would possess sufficient know-how, steady-handedly controlling either precise butcher's cut tools at convenient knife handles anatomy. The investigation began by reviewing the last known location of the deceased man, Marcos. This led authorities to the luxury residential complex where Marcos lived with his wife and daughter. The complex was equipped with multiple security cameras, which were thoroughly examined. A review of the footage revealed that the evening before Marcos disappeared, he and his wife had ordered food delivery. The elevator camera captured Marcos going down to the first floor to collect the food, returning with pizza boxes in hand. He then entered his apartment and was not seen leaving again that evening, night, or the following day. It appeared as though Marcos vanished into thin air. Elise leaves their apartment with 3 large, heavy suitcases. Investigators, who already had suspicions, take her into custody for questioning. At first, she denies any involvement in her husband's disappearance, sticking to her initial claim that he left her for another woman. However, when shown footage of her moving the suitcases, she breaks down and confesses. According to her, their marriage had been troubled for some time, and her husband had become increasingly abusive. Marcos would constantly humiliate her, criticize her for her past work as an escort, and claimed that she was a bad mother to their daughter. Marcos exerted total control over his wife Elise, not even allowing her to make friends. When she once mentioned divorce, Marcos threatened to leave her with nothing, take their child, and prevent her from seeing him. On the evening of the incident, Elise showed Marcos pictures from a detective, which depicted him with his mistress. Instead of remorse, Marcos became enraged and slapped Elise. She claims that everything after that was a blur. The next thing Elise remembers is holding a gun, which she used to shoot her husband. Upon realizing what had happened, she decided to dispose of the body to make it seem like Marcos had vanished. Elise drew upon her experience as a nurse and knowledge of human anatomy to do so. Additionally, Marcos had previously taught her how to skin and dismember animal carcasses, and they had the necessary tools at home. After Elise killed her husband, she dismembered and bagged his body while their young daughter slept in the next room. It was later discovered that the evidence of her husband's infidelity, which included photos and videos, was only received by Elise on May 20th, after she had already murdered him. This evidence was provided by a private detective. Elise then used this evidence to deceive her husband's parents, telling them that he had abandoned her for his mistress. The investigation also found Natasha Lima, who testified in court that Marcos had wanted a divorce but was afraid of Elise due to her alleged mental instability and capability for violent behavior. Natasha last saw her lover the day before he disappeared. He was unhappy about the constant family scandals and planned to start a new life in Florida after selling the company. However, his wife Elise was not part of these plans. He intended to divorce her and forget her completely. A shocking twist was the discovery of blood in the lungs of the deceased Marcos. This suggested that Marcos was still alive when Elise decapitated him, indicating he had struggled to breathe. This contradicted Elise's claim that he died instantly from a gunshot wound. Further examination by the pathologist revealed that the bullet had entered Marcos's head at an unusual angle. It seemed he was caught off guard, sitting or lying down when shot, and didn't try to defend himself. Elise Matsunaga's claim that her husband attacked her and she defended herself was disputed by multiple witnesses at her trial. They testified that Marcos had a difficult personality and often spoke harshly, but he never physically harmed anyone. As a result, the court believed Elise fabricated the story and found her guilty of premeditated murder with cruelty and attempting to conceal the crime. She received a 20-year prison sentence, which many considered too lenient. Her in-laws now care for their daughter. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kaler family. James Craig Kaler was born in Weatherford, Texas in 1963, and his future wife, Karen Kaler, was born in the same city 2 years later. They met in the early 1980s while attending a university in Texas. At the time, Craig was a senior studying engineering, and Karen was a freshman in the humanities department. Despite their different fields of study, they quickly discovered common interests and started a romantic relationship. After graduating, they had a small, intimate wedding with close friends and family. They welcomed their first child, Emily, in 1991, followed by Lauren in 1993. The family lived in a cozy house in Weatherford and enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with a higher-than-average income for their area. In 1999, Craig received a lucrative job offer from a major utility company in Weatherford, which coincided with the birth of their son, Sean. Craig adored his son and, with his increased salary, purchased a spacious house in the city's most prestigious neighborhood and a family car. Karen stayed at home to care for their children, and Craig became the primary breadwinner. From the outside, their family appeared to be living a perfect life. Their 3 children have also had many successes in their fields. Emily and Lauren are talented in sports and music. Emily studies at a prestigious pharmacy college and Lauren hopes to attend a conservatory. Sean, on the other hand, showed a keen interest in mathematics and had dreams of becoming an archaeologist. The family's home life seemed idyllic, Craig providing for the family and Karen taking care of the household and raising the children. However, the family was struggling with hidden problems. In 2007, Karen confided in her sister Linda, revealing that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown due to Craig's controlling behavior. Craig exerted total control over Karen's daily life, demanding a detailed account of every expense, no matter how small, and requiring her to report her whereabouts at all times. The family lives on a strict schedule, with Craig setting their daily routines, including bedtime, wake-up time, meal times. This rigidity makes Karen feel suffocated and trapped. Over time, Craig's need for control grew stronger. He became more demanding and selfish, scheduling Karen's every move. She felt like she had no time left for herself, there was only duty to complete. Karen tried to meet her husband's demands, hoping he would ease up and they could return to their normal life. However, Craig seemed to enjoy exerting control and refused to change. Linda was extremely worried about her sister's confide. Like everyone else, she saw Craig as the ideal husband, father, and family man, only to discover he was a controlling man. Despite this, Karen didn't want to break up her family. Additionally, she and her children relied on Craig financially. So, she decided to find a job that would give her a stable income. She joined a local gym without telling her husband, using it as an escape to clear her mind and work through her emotions. She spent several hours there every day, scheduling her time around her husband Craig's work schedule so he wouldn't notice. Not long after, the gym manager noticed her because of her attractive appearance, excellent fitness, and her hard work. Karen was given the chance to work as a fitness with the possibility of a permanent contract. This was a dream come true for her, as she could now get paid for doing something she loved. However, she was worried about how her husband, Craig, would react when he found out. When Craig found out about Karen's new job, she thought he would be angry and forbid her to continue. Surprisingly, he received this news calmly and even seemed pleased that she had found a way to make money on her own. He had a few conditions. She had to be home when he arrived, cook meals, and not let her new job interfere with their intimate life. Karen found these conditions acceptable, as she now had more freedom and independence. As Karen settled into her new job, she met a new instructor named Sunny Reese, and they quickly became friends. For Karen, who had spent years at home with little social interaction, Sunny became a trusted confidant. The two women spent time together at work, went for walks, had coffee, and shared heartfelt conversations. But little did Karen know, this new friendship would soon lead to unexpected romance and a complicated love triangle. It didn't take long for Karen and Sunny's friendship to evolve into a romantic relationship. At first, they kept their feelings a secret from everyone. However, after some time, Karen decided it was necessary to be honest with her husband, Craig. She spent months preparing for this conversation, searching for the right words and worrying about the potential consequences. Eventually, she confessed to Craig. Craig's reaction to his wife's revelation was surprisingly calm. However, the next day, he made an unexpected condition for accepting Karen's relationship with Sunny, which was that he wanted to be a part of it. Karen was shocked and unsure of how to respond to her husband's talk. Nevertheless, Craig took the initiative and began wooing Sunny, sending her flowers and gifts. He seemed to view this as an opportunity to revitalize his intimate life and bring new passion to his marriage. Initially, Karen and Sunny agreed to Craig's proposal. However, they soon realized that his intentions were aimed at domination. However, their unusual love triangle was short-lived. Craig demanded that Karen end the affair immediately. Despite this, Karen continued to see Sunny, as she had genuinely fallen in love. After almost 20 years of marriage, Karen seemed ready to leave her husband for someone new. This led to a series of secret actions, including moving to another state, scheduling secret meetings. In an attempt to salvage his family, Craig thought it best to relocate to another state. He started job hunting, sending out his resume, and soon secured a role as a water director for a large company in Columbia, Missouri, not far from Kansas. Craig hoped that by moving to a new state, his wife's affair with Sonny would end, and their family life would normalize. However, the summer 2008 move proved challenging for the family, as the kids had to switch schools, make new friends, and adapt to a new city. Although the family was already financially comfortable, Craig's new job nearly doubled his previous salary from Weatherford. Despite his increased responsibilities and work hours, Craig mistakenly believed he had successfully removed Sonny from his wife's life. However, Karen and Sonny continued to communicate regularly through calls, texts, and secret meetings. They would meet halfway, spend a couple of hours in a roadside hotel, and then return home. At this point, Karen realized her marriage was over. She no longer loved Craig, and it was only a matter of time before they divorced. These clandestine meetings persisted until December 2008. At the New Year's Eve celebration that year, the Kaler family went back to their hometown to reconnect with relatives and friends. Sonny was also in attendance at the gathering. Initially, Karen and Sonny kept a low profile, merely exchanging greetings. As the celebration continues and the alcohol slowly affects Karen and Sonny's behavior, they seem to have no regard for social norms. They became inseparable, openly showing affection by holding hands, sharing romantic glances, they even kissed. Craig's anger boiled over into fury after Karen publicly humiliated him by revealing her affair at a party attended by dozens of acquaintances. He lashed out at Karen and Sonny before dragging Karen away from the party. In his rage, Craig lost control and physically assaulted Karen, ripping her dress and slapping her, causing her to fall and hit her head. The incident marked the beginning of the end of their marriage. A few days later, Karen announced she was leaving Craig and initiated divorce proceedings, seeking custody of their children. Initially, Craig attempted to apologize and salvage their relationship for the sake of the children. But Karen was resolute. She said they should divorce, causing Craig to contact friends and family, begging them to convince Karen to reconsider. In the spring of 2009, Craig and Karen's marriage continued to deteriorate. Despite Craig's attempts to salvage their relationship, Karen made it clear she was leaving him for Sonny and she had never been truly happy in their marriage. The tension between them escalated into physical violence, with Craig grabbing Karen during an argument, leaving bruises on her arms. Karen reported the incident to the police, leading to Craig's arrest. After the incident, Karen took the children and moved out without waiting for the divorce to be finalized. Craig was devastated by her departure, and even more so when he discovered that his daughters, Emily and Lauren, were siding with their mother. They told him that they had never seen their mother so happy, which Craig perceived as a betrayal. As a result, he cut off contact with his daughters, only spending time with his son Sean on weekends. Despite the ongoing divorce proceedings, Craig held on to the hope that Karen would change her mind and return to him. His desire to control her led him to engage in jealous behavior, including stalking her and attempting to install a hidden camera in her home. To pursue this, Craig sacrificed his work, initially taking vacation time, then claiming illness, and eventually skipping work altogether without explanation. This reckless behavior resulted in Craig's termination from his job. Without a steady income, he was forced to move in with his parents as he could no longer afford to live on his own. With ample free time, Craig began stalking Karen, prompting her to take him to court to obtain a restraining order. In November 2009, just before Thanksgiving, Karen took her children to visit their 89-year-old grandmother, Dorothy White, in Burlingame, Kansas. On the evening of November 29th, the Burlingame police received a distress call about a suspicious van and reports of gunshots. Dorothy's neighbors reported witnessing a small truck pull up to her house. A man exit the vehicle and enter the house. They claimed to have heard screams and gunshots, but were uncertain. The man then left the house, got back into the truck, and sped away. The neighbors did not attempt to apprehend him, fearing he was armed. When police arrived, they were met by 10-year-old Sean Kaler, who was frantically calling for help. Although Sean was unable to explain what had happened, it was clear that a horrific scene awaited the police. Inside the home, near the front door, Sonny was found lying in a pool of blood but surprisingly still alive despite having 2 gunshot wounds. In the kitchen, police discovered the lifeless body of 44-year-old Karen, who had been shot in the chest and then fatally shot at close range in the head. The body of her oldest daughter, 18-year-old Emily, was found between a wall and a couch. It appeared that Emily had attempted to hide from her enraged father but was caught and killed with 2 point-blank shots. Lauren, found in a pool of blood in the second-floor bedroom, was still alive but weakly called for help and repeatedly said that her father was the one who did it. Dorothy and Lauren were rushed to a nearby hospital's intensive care unit. Despite the doctor's efforts, Lauren died on December 1st due to massive blood loss and internal organ damage. Her great-grandmother passed away a few hours later. Sean, the only surviving witness, was in shock. Psychologists worked with him, but a thorough interrogation was necessary as he was the only living witness to the tragic events at his great-grandmother's house. Sean recounted that evening, stating that his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he approached her to ask for his favorite pie. Suddenly, the back door swung open, and his father entered with a shotgun, pointing it at Karen without a word. He shot her, then moved closer and fired again. Sean was initially frozen in horror. His father then turned to Sean but didn't aim the gun. Instead, Craig stared at Sean silently and intently. Sean realized he had to escape. So he jumped out the open back door. He ran towards the main entrance, hoping to alert his grandmother, sisters, and call for help. However, upon reaching the threshold, he heard several more gunshots. Fearing what he might find inside, Sean hid in a small outbuilding. He heard more gunshots and waited in terror, afraid that his father would come after him. Craig Kaler was immediately added to the wanted list, with a warning that he was armed and extremely dangerous. As police received multiple reports of a speeding truck, they were able to quickly determine the direction the gunman was heading. At one point, Craig abandoned his vehicle in a wooded area and began walking down a deserted road. Law enforcement soon caught up with him and apprehended him the next morning. Upon arrest, police found the rifle and ammunition in the back seat of the abandoned vehicle, along with prescription medication for depression and anxiety disorders near the driver's seat. Craig did not resist arrest and appeared confused and frightened. He admitted to being armed with a gun and a hunting knife, but claimed he did not intend to use them. He also acknowledged that he had done something terrible, which he believed the police already knew about. At the police station, Craig fully confessed to his crimes and opened up to the investigating officer. He shared how his wife had cheated on him with someone named Sonny and how they had humiliated him in front of friends at a New Year's Eve party. He explained how his attempts to save his marriage had cost him his job and what was left of his self-respect. Craig became emotional, stating that he didn't know how he had decided to take such drastic action and felt that everyone, including his daughters, had betrayed him. Craig's trial started in December 2010. Craig, advised by his lawyer Thomas Heaney, retracted his initial confession. He claimed his actions were due to mental illness and insanity, which was his only defense to avoid the death penalty for the murder of 4 people. Heaney argued that Craig was in a fragile mental state following a series of personal setbacks. His wife had left him for someone else, his children sided with their mother, he lost his job and had to move back in with his parents. According to Heaney, these factors led to a breakdown, and Craig committed the crime while insane, without realizing what he was doing. However, the prosecution found no evidence of insanity or an altered mental state in Craig's actions. They argued that his actions were calculated, as he had purchased guns and ammunition in advance and went to the victim's house knowing his family was there. He shot each victim twice, ensuring no chance of survival, but intentionally spared his son Sean, allowing him to escape. In August 2011, Craig was found guilty on all counts and received a death sentence. At the final hearing, 12-year-old Sean testified, stating that he didn't want his father to die, as he was his only remaining close relative. Despite multiple appeals by Craig and his lawyers, the verdict has remained unchanged. As of today, Craig is still in prison, fighting to have the case reviewed and the death sentence overturned. After the death of his mother and sisters, Sean moved in with his grandmother. Now Sean has grown up and he has completed his studies and chosen to stay and work in his hometown. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Samantha Josephson. Samantha Josephson was born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. She majored in political science at the University of South Carolina. She plans to attend Drexel University School of Law with the goal of specializing in international law. Samantha received a full scholarship to Drexel University and a partial scholarship to Rutgers University, and hopes to pursue a career in international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority and had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona. While in South Carolina, she also visited Madrid and Paris. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg. Samantha and Greg communicated regularly through text messages and phone calls every day whenever possible. Even though Samantha was about to enter law school, they still planned to build a future together. Greg planned to move in with her and support her. However, everything changed on Friday, March 29, 2019, when Samantha did not return to her apartment. On March 28, 2019, Samantha decided to hang out with her roommate and friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Although her boyfriend, Greg, was unable to come along, the group visited several bars before ending up at the Bird Dog Bar in 5 Points, a popular place for students to socialize. Samantha was hanging out with friends, but she kept texting her boyfriend, Greg. She wanted him to drive to Columbia to be with her. However, they had plans to meet up the following weekend, so Greg decided not to go to Columbia with her. He kept in regular contact with Samantha. Around 2 a.m., Samantha left and returned to her apartment alone. She called an Uber to get home. Samantha was waiting for an Uber. While waiting, she talked to Greg on the phone at around 2:04 a.m. and told him she was on her way home. She had used Uber many times before to get to and from bars. Shortly after requesting a ride, a car pulled up at the curb where Samantha walked up to the car, realized it wasn't hers, and then turned around to return to her spot on the sidewalk. She was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala pulled up in front of Samantha. She said goodbye to Greg, assuming the Impala was her ride. She opened the door, exchanged a quick word with the driver, and got into the back seat. The car sped off immediately. Meanwhile, the actual Uber she had ordered arrived at the pickup location, but the driver couldn't find Samantha and eventually canceled the request and left. The black Chevrolet Impala circled the area several times before targeting Samantha. This behavior suggests that the driver was aware of the college students who congregated on 5 Point streets after the bars closed, waiting for the car to leave. Meanwhile, Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, had been tracking her movements using the Find My Friends app to make sure she got home safely. He noticed that she was moving in the opposite direction of her apartment, which initially did not raise any concerns because he thought she might be visiting a friend. However, when he texted her to check in, he received no response. Greg tried calling Samantha, but she didn't answer. He sent her multiple texts, but they showed up as delivered, not read. This meant Samantha wasn't reading his messages. Her phone's location stopped sharing, which surprised Greg because it had never happened before. He thought maybe she had left her phone in the Uber. Concerned, Greg contacted her friends and roommate to see if they had heard from her or if she had made it home safely. However, no one had any news about her whereabouts. Greg decided to rest, hoping Samantha would show up tomorrow morning. The next morning, Samantha was missing. Her roommates filed a missing person report. Her boyfriend, Greg, drove 2 hours to Colombia to help search for her. Shortly after the report was filed, a group of turkey hunters found the body of a young woman in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles from 5 Points. The hunters immediately called 911 after the discovery, and the local sheriff's office quickly dispatched deputies to the scene. The body was later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson. An autopsy revealed that Samantha's body had more than 120 separate stab wounds, affecting multiple areas, including her face, head, neck, arms, torso, legs, and feet. In an attempt to defend herself, her fingernails were severely damaged as she tried to evade a sharp object. Evidence suggested a double-edged knife had been used, and she had then been dragged into the woods. An autopsy revealed that her body contained only 20 milliliters of blood. Samantha had suffered severe blood loss. Police quickly obtained surveillance footage from the bar the night of the incident, which showed Samantha getting into a black Chevrolet Impala. The footage showed the car circling the block several times. Police discovered that Samantha had accidentally gotten into the killer's car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber that Samantha had called arrived a short time later. However, when the driver realized that Samantha was not there, he canceled the ride and left. Police believe that the suspect may have used a childproof lock to lock her inside, as when the childproof lock is on, the doors can only be opened from the outside of the car, so Samantha would not have been able to get out at that point. A description of the vehicle was released to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrator, and shortly after, police spotted a black Chevrolet Impala during a 3 a.m. patrol on March 30th, while patrolling the area where Samantha was abducted. When the police stopped the car, the driver immediately jumped out and started running. After a short chase, he was arrested. When police checked his ID, they discovered that the man arrested was Nathaniel Rowland, 24, of New Zion. During a search of the vehicle, patrol officers discovered a child car seat in the back, surrounded by blood stains. This discovery prompted them to call for backup, as police suspected it was a crime scene. Homicide detectives were called to investigate and conducted a thorough search of the vehicle. They discovered multiple blood stains on the passenger seat and in the trunk, as well as a bloody footprint on one of the rear windows. Samantha's cell phone was found on the floor of the car. Police later discovered that Nathaniel had tried to sell it to a pawn shop earlier that day, but he had refused their offer of $125 and left the phone in the car. Police also found that the child locks were activated, which Nathaniel had used to lock Samantha inside. Several cleaning products, including bleach, window cleaner, and antibacterial wipes, were found in the car. Nathaniel had cleaned his car, but there was still a trace of blood in the car. During questioning, Nathaniel repeatedly denied any involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. He maintained his innocence. Police searching Nathaniel's body discovered traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails. However, no DNA from Nathaniel was found on Samantha's body. Police pieced together the evidence and speculated that Samantha was the victim of a sudden and violent attack. The fact that the child-proof locks in the car were still active at the time of Nathaniel's arrest led them to conclude that he must have activated the feature as soon as Samantha got into the car. Nathaniel suddenly stabbed her multiple times with a double-edged knife. Taken by surprise by the brutality of the attack, she struggled to fend off the blows, which explains the multiple stab wounds to her hands and the severe damage to her fingernails. Samantha was attacked by Nathaniel, who scratched Nathaniel's hand, leaving skin cells under her fingernails as evidence. After the attack, Nathaniel drove to a remote road in New Zion and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Upon returning home, Nathaniel posted on social media, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Nathaniel's neighborhood is minutes away from where Samantha's body was found. A background check on Nathaniel showed that he attended South Carolina State University in 2017. However, there is no record of him graduating, and it is unclear what job he was doing at the time of the incident. Nathaniel was previously arrested for assaulting and robbing a woman in October 2018. Police searched Nathaniel's girlfriend, Maria Howard's apartment in New Zion, where he was living. They found evidence in a trash can behind the apartment, including a sock and towel with blood stains on it, which belonged to Nathaniel. The blood was later determined to be Samantha's. Police also discovered a blood-stained white cloth, duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a double-edged knife with obvious blood stains. Tests later confirmed that blood found on the double-edged knife, bed sheets, car, and bleach wipes matched Samantha Josephson. Nathaniel was charged with kidnapping and murder. The trial took place. Nathaniel maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence against him. In the summer of 2021, Nathaniel's defense team argued that he was innocent, as there was no DNA of his on Samantha. Prosecutors countered Nathaniel's claim of innocence with a large amount of evidence gathered in the case. Key evidence included CCTV footage showing Nathaniel's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, as well as several incriminating physical pieces of evidence found in his car. Additionally, cell phone tracking showed that Nathaniel and Samantha's phones were in the same location at the time of the murder. Furthermore, Nathaniel lived near where Samantha's body was discovered. The prosecution presented 31 witnesses, including a person who saw Nathaniel cleaning the murder weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend, who claimed that her daughter had blood on her shoes after being in Nathaniel's car. After the murder, Nathaniel did not contact any witnesses to testify in his favor, and no members of Nathaniel's family came forward to defend him. Despite this, Nathaniel maintained his innocence and appealed to the judge. The jury deliberated for only an hour before returning a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Ewell family. Dale Ewell was born in Ohio during the Great Depression. This challenging time in him the value of hard work and the importance of money, as he learned to appreciate every dollar he made. His family struggled financially, which likely motivated him to become determined and ambitious. Dale married Glee Michelle, a multi-talented woman, who worked as an elementary school teacher, a translator for the CIA, and served on a commission at the State Bar of California. They had 2 children, Tiffany born in 1967 and Dana in 1971. Dale's success provided the Ewell family with a comfortable life, including a home in Sunnyside, a beachfront property in Peraro Dunes, luxury cars, and designer clothing. After serving in the Air Force, Dale became a successful businessman. He eventually became the president and owner of Western Piper Sales Incorporated, a company that sold small aircraft. The primary source of the Ewell income came from selling light aircraft and investing heavily in the stock market. After establishing a successful aviation business, Dale expanded into buying several farms, accumulating substantial wealth. Together, Dale and Glee were worth an estimated $8 million, embodying the American dream. Despite their wealth, they lived modestly. Their children chose different directions in life. Tiffany pursued a similar career to her parents, whereas Dana chose a distinctly different route. At university, Dana presented himself as a successful entrepreneur, falsely claiming to be the source of his family's wealth. This fabricated story gained attention from a local newspaper and was even included in his school yearbook. In 1990, while attending Santa Clara University, Dana was fixated on wealth and luxury. He owned a BMW and had access to funds, allowing him to indulge in expensive items like jewelry. From a young age, Dana had a habit of lying and making up stories. Despite being intelligent and well-educated, Dana's ambitions went beyond comfort, wealth, and a promising future. He had the same ambitions as his father, but he didn't have the drive to achieve them in a proper and lawful way. Dana began fabricating elaborate and false stories about his accomplishments and importance while he was a student at the University of Santa Clara. He lied to both faculty and peers, claiming he was the head of a multi-million-dollar company. His false narrative included starting as a stockbroker at 18, moving to aircraft sales, and eventually becoming president of his own aircraft manufacturing company. The tension between Dana and his father, Dale, was largely unknown to others. Dana's tall tales may have caused his father embarrassment and contributed to their conflicts. Despite Dale's humble beginnings and generous support for his children, Dana seemed to have an excessive sense of entitlement. Dana Ewell presented himself as excessively self-centered and arrogant, prioritizing his wealth and social standing above all else. On Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992, the weather in Sunnyside, California was mild with partial sunshine, resulting in a pleasant afternoon. Dale, 59, spent the Easter weekend at his beach house with his 57-year-old wife, Glee, and their 24-year-old daughter, Tiffany. Glee and Tiffany returned to their home in Sunnyside by car, while Dale flew his private plane to his hangar and then drove home. When they arrived, they were ambushed. Tiffany was shot in the head and killed, followed by Glee, who was shot multiple times. The killers stayed in the house, waiting for Dale to arrive. 30 minutes later, Dale arrived home and was also fatally shot as he entered the house from the garage. 2 days later, Dana, the youngest member of the family, tried to contact his parents but was unable to reach them. Dana had spent the Easter weekend in San Francisco with his girlfriend and her father, an FBI agent. On April 21, 1992, the family's housekeeper, Juanita, arrived at the house for work and found Tiffany's body lying in a pool of blood in the kitchen. Juanita was distraught and sought help from a neighbor, who called the police. Meanwhile, Dana was still in Monterey, California. At the time of the murders, Dana was contacted by the authorities. His girlfriend's father quickly arranged for him to fly to Fresno, and Dana was visibly upset during this time. The police then started a thorough investigation, spending many days collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The crime scene was made to look like a robbery. However, experienced detectives believed the scene was deliberately staged to make it appear as though the family had been attacked and then killed by an intruder. Upon further examination, detectives found several irregularities, including the lack of weapons, bloodstains, footprints, or DNA evidence. Instead, the detectives found that the attack was carefully planned and carried out. The attacker was a skilled shooter, missing only one shot, and had even picked up the spent bullet casings inside the house. Investigators found a box of 9mm ammunition that Dale had purchased. It was later discovered that it had been used in the murder. The home appeared to have been ransacked, but nothing valuable was missing. There was no evidence of forced entry, and the alarm, which was usually turned on, had been turned off. Investigators thoroughly examined the victims' backgrounds, searching for any clues that might be connected to their deaths. They looked into Dale's past dealings, which included selling airplanes to an individual later convicted of drug smuggling in the 1970s, and a questionable real estate transaction with Dale's brother that potentially put investors at risk of losing millions. The police thoroughly investigated and eliminated all other potential suspects with motives. Ultimately, they concentrating on Dana, as he was the one who would benefit the most from the tragic event. As the only surviving member of the Ewell family and the main beneficiary of the estate, Dana naturally became a person of interest. Even though he had a solid alibi, having been with his girlfriend and her FBI agent father at the time of the murders, the police couldn't shake their suspicions about him. Dana's actions did not ease the concerns of others, but rather intensified their suspicions about his involvement in the murder. Although he outwardly showed distress and even offered a $50,000 reward for the capture of the killer, his grief seemed insincere. His reaction to the horrific killing of family members seemed surprisingly subdued, as he displayed little of the shock and sorrow that people typically exhibit in response to such a traumatic event. Instead of focusing on mourning the loss of his loved ones, Dana seemed more concerned with his parents' wills and inheritance. He did something disturbing, inviting a friend to view the house while there was still obvious blood on it, demonstrating a disregard for the victims. Furthermore, he allegedly expressed contempt for the police investigation, calling the investigators dummies who would never solve the case. Dana eluded authorities for 3 years, during which time they thoroughly investigated every lead to help solve the case. The situation worsened after Dale's brothers reported Dana to the authorities, claiming he had done something wrong. According to them, Dana became furious when he heard the will being read, as he learned that he wouldn't have full access to the $8 million estate until he was in his 30s. Dana reportedly slammed his hands on the table and screamed, asking why his father could do this to him. The trust stipulated that his parents would cover his expenses until he was 25, then he would receive investment dividends until he was 30. At 30, he would have access to half of the estate, with the remaining half available at 35. Before the funeral, the Ewell brothers act to prevent Dana from reclaiming what he believes is his. However, Dana managed to obtain around $300,000 from an insurance policy. Dana's uncles actively prevented him from inheriting his father's assets, causing him significant frustration. Despite the growing scrutiny from investigators and accusations from his own family members that he was involved in the murder to gain control of the family estate, Dana showed no signs of worry. He continued to live a lavish lifestyle, showering his girlfriend Monica with expensive gifts and even helping with her education costs. However, it was unclear where his money was coming from. Investigators suspected that money was a key factor in the murders and dug deeper. They discovered that Dana had been stealing money from various sources, including his grandmother's trust account, which had held $400,000. By the time detectives stepped in, the grandmother was left with only $22,000 to cover her care at a nursing home. The discovery that Dana had been exploiting his grandmother for personal gain further strengthened the police's suspicions about his character. However, authorities still need concrete evidence to prove Dana's involvement in the murder. Joel, one of Dana's college acquaintances, was particularly drawn to Dana's stories of a wealthy, successful lifestyle. Joel found Dana's apparent ability to effortlessly attract beautiful women especially intriguing. People around were surprised by their friendship, as they seemed to have little in common. Dana was driven by a desire for higher social status, while Joel's interests lay in video games, firearms, and explosives. Despite their differences, Joel's friendship with Dana gave him the opportunity to attend fancy parties and meet attractive women. Shortly after the Ewell family murders, Joel dropped out of school and soon became Dana's roommate in the Ewell family's former home. This marked a significant development in the investigation. Both Dana and Joel started making unusual purchases, such as helicopter flying lessons, despite Joel having no apparent source of income. As a result, investigators began surveilling both, monitoring their communications through pagers and payphones. Authorities cloned Dana's pager and tapped his landline in May 1993. An officer overheard Joel discussing the investigation on a payphone, saying, "They don't have evidence, they'll try to catch you in a lie." Meanwhile, Dana continued spending lavishly, buying a new car for his girlfriend and paying her law school tuition. After using up the insurance payout, he took $400,000 from his grandmother's account, leaving her with only $22,000 for her nursing home expenses. In 1994, investigators shifted their focus to forensic analysis, which revealed that the murder weapon was a rare 9mm assault rifle made in Colorado. Records from the company showed that a rifle had been bought by Innes Jack Pond just before April 1992. Notably, Jack was a high school friend of Joel. When questioned, Jack first denied buying the rifle, then claimed he bought it as a birthday present for himself, and said the gun was later stolen. The evidence against Dana and Joel continued to mount. At one point, detectives visited Dana at his university dorm and told him they believed Joel was responsible for killing his family. Dana stayed silent, visibly pale. After the detectives departed, Dana and his girlfriend, Monica, promptly contacted Joel's brother, Radovic, but they did not realize that they were being followed by the police. On March 2, 1995, police arrested Dana, Joel, and Peter, Joel's brother, and Jack Pond. Peter had made a deal with the authorities, agreeing to testify against his younger brother and Dana in exchange for immunity. Peter confessed to the police that he had made a homemade silencer and attached it to the murder weapon. He also admitted to getting rid of the gun barrel, Joel's tennis shoes, and some gun magazines. Peter said he did these things with the help of Jack Pond. When Jack was arrested, he gave a different account of the gun. He said he bought the gun for Joel but didn't know it was going to be used for the murders. Jack also confirmed that he and Peter had disposed of evidence together. Jack received immunity in exchange for his testimony, just like Peter. As a result of statements made by Peter and Jack, the barrel of the murder weapon was found buried in a field in Rica. Unlike Peter and Jack, Dana and Joel were not offered plea deals. They were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, which made them eligible for the death penalty. The trial began in late 1997. Dana and Joel, who had previously been close friends and had even lived together in the house where the murders occurred, now had separate lawyers and took different stances during the trial. Prosecutors argued that Dana's motive for the murders was greed, claiming he had promised Joel a share of the inheritance. Dana's lawyer argued that he was innocent, suggesting that Joel and Jack had planned and carried out the murders. Joel's lawyer acknowledged the strong evidence against his client and focused on trying to save him from the death penalty. During the trial, Jack Pond testified that he had bought the murder weapon for Joel and helped dispose of it. He also said Joel had given him details of the incidents on the day of the murder, in April 1992. According to Jack, Dana had asked Joel for a favor that he found hard to refuse. Having taken steps to avoid leaving DNA evidence behind, Joel carried out Dana's plan by entering the Ewell residence. He shaved off all body hair and then waited 12 hours on a plastic sheet to minimize the risk of leaving any traces, including an eyelash. He was also instructed to retrieve all bullet casings. Tiffany was shot in the back of the head and died instantly, without seeing her killer. Glee, however, saw Joel and tried to escape to the office, but was shot and severely injured. Joel pursued her and eventually killed her. During the trial, it was revealed that Joel had shot Glee multiple times at close range, and that she had recognized him as a friend of Dana's who had visited the family a month earlier. After killing Glee, Joel reloaded his gun and put on new gloves, then waited for Dale to arrive, whom he also murdered. On May 27, 1998, after an 8-month trial, the jury delivered a finding Dana Ewell and Joel guilty on all charges. However, they could not agree on the sentencing. 2 votes saved Joel from the death penalty, while Dana escaped the death penalty by just 1 vote. In the end, both received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Dana was imprisoned at Corcoran State Prison, 50 miles south of Fresno. He was among inmates like Charles Manson. His grandmother, whom he stole from, died in 1999. Dana claims to have undergone a spiritual transformation and become a Christian while in prison. Joel was imprisoned at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Meanwhile, Jack Pond pursued a career in law, becoming an attorney. Monica Zent broke up with Dana, finished law school, and established a successful law practice. Although Monica was thoroughly investigated, no evidence connected her to the crime. The only suspicious aspects were her initial unwillingness to cooperate and that some of the funds were used to help pay for her law school expenses. Dana Ewell's actions can be summed up by 3 words: greed, entitlement, and heartlessness. His extreme desire for wealth led him to manipulate and betray those closest to him, ultimately leading to the tragic deaths of his family members. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Vincent Brothers. Vincent Brothers was born on May 30, 1962, in Long Island, New York. From a young age, he was known for his charisma, reliability, and diligence. He also served in the Marine Corps Reserves. After graduating from Norfolk State University, Vincent moved to California in the mid-1980s to pursue further education and eventually earned a master's degree. Despite having a successful career as a school administrator, Vincent's personal life was marred by tumultuous relationships. His 2 previous marriages ended in divorce. In 1988, while working at California State University in Bakersfield, Vincent had a daughter with his girlfriend. He took his girlfriend to court to establish paternity and was eventually awarded custody and visitation rights. Initially required to pay $350 per month in child support, this amount was increased to $771 in 2003. That same year, Vincent was convicted of wife abuse and received a 6-day jail sentence and probation. In 1992, Vincent married for the second time, but this marriage also ended in divorce in 1996 due to accusations of intimidation and physical abuse by his second wife. While serving as the assistant principal at Emerson High School, Vincent was accused of sexually harassing a colleague. The woman claimed that Vincent assaulted her at his home and took her phone to prevent her from calling the police. When she tried to report the incident to the police, she said police discouraged her from pursuing charges because she was afraid of Vincent's reputation. The harassment continued at school, with Vincent allegedly touching her inappropriately. The woman eventually resigned from her job as a teacher, citing an unfriendly work environment. The school district investigated Vincent due to his increasingly threatening behavior and threatening phone calls. Despite Vincent denying the allegations and having no disciplinary record, the school district transferred him to another school as a precaution. Vincent then began working at John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield, California, where he also became famous and respected. Vincent was especially known for ensuring the safety of students by taking them home after school. While teaching at Fremont Elementary School, Vincent met Joni Harper, the school's security supervisor and basketball manager. Vincent and Joni began dating and eventually married after the birth of their first child, Marcus. Their family grew with the arrival of their second child, Lindsay, in 2000. However, Vincent's infidelity caused him and Joni to divorce in September 2001. 2 years later, Vincent and Joni remarried in secret, and their third child, Marshall, was born 4 months later. Joni eventually opened up to her friends about the problems in her marriage. Unlike before, she expressed her fear that Vincent might harm her. However, to those around them, Vincent's family appeared happy and actively involved in the community, often attending local events and maintaining good relationships with others. From the outside, Joni and Vincent's marriage seemed stable. Joni continued to work as a basketball manager, pursuing her passion. However, no one expected that the tragic events hidden behind the family's happy exterior would soon emerge. 3 months before the tragic event, Vincent had moved out of the house due to frequent arguments with his mother-in-law, Ernestine. On July 6, 2003, Joni attended a church service with her 3 children, Marcus, Lindsay, and 6-week-old Marshall, as well as her mother, Ernestine. The family had lunch at Black Angus after the ceremony, then returned home for a nap. As was their custom, Joni and the children stayed in one bedroom, while Ernestine stayed in another room in the house. Tragically, the family was attacked in their home. The killer easily entered the house without signs of forced entry and shot Joni twice in the head while she was in the bedroom. Lindsay was also shot in the back. The noise alerted Ernestine, causing her to quickly arm herself with a .38 revolver and move toward the hallway to investigate. Unfortunately, she was killed before she could defend herself. The attacker shot Ernestine twice in the face, causing her to collapse in the hallway outside her bedroom. The attacker then entered the room and shot Marcus, followed by a fatal shot to the baby's back. Each shot was aimed very carefully. Instead of fleeing the scene immediately, the attacker went to the kitchen to get a knife and then returned to the bedroom. There, the attacker stabbed the victims multiple times in the back. On July 8, 2003, Kelsey Spann, Joni's best friend, became worried when she had not heard from Joni, Ernestine, and Joni's children since they went to church the previous Sunday. Kelsey decided to go to Joni's house to check on them using the key Joni had given her. When she tried to unlock the door, she found it difficult to open due to an obstacle. She then went to the back of the house and found an unlocked sliding glass door, which was unusual. Upon entering the house, Kelsey discovered Joni, her mother Ernestine, and Marcus, Lindsay, and Marshall, all dead. Kelsey immediately contacted authorities at 7 a.m. They arrived at the scene and discovered 5 family members brutally murdered. The family's peaceful home, located in a quiet neighborhood, became the scene of a horrific crime. The police investigation concluded that the family had been tragically killed on Sunday afternoon as they returned from church. Before leaving the scene, the perpetrator covered the bodies in the bedroom with blankets and pillows taken from other rooms. Detectives identified Joni as the primary target due to the severity of her injuries, suggesting the attacker had been extremely angry. Police were concerned about Vincent's safety and discovered he had been in Ohio. Detective Watts traveled to North Carolina, where Vincent was visiting his mother with his brother Melvin. When North Carolina police met with Vincent, they found him severely traumatized and unable to speak coherently, which did not provide many details about the investigation. Vincent's behavior was inconsistent with that of a murderer, and because he had been on the other side of the country when the murder occurred, police initially ruled him out as a suspect. He also provided receipts showing purchases made around the time of the tragedy, confirming that he had not been in Bakersfield, California, where the incident occurred. However, Detective Watts still doubted Vincent's innocence. Notably, Vincent never asked how his wife and children had died, which aroused suspicion. On July 11, 2003, Vincent had returned to Los Angeles without attending their family's memorial service, but Vincent had attended their funeral 5 days later. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Vincent had moved out of his family home in April 2003. Additionally, his wife, Joni, had been planning to divorce him again and had sought child support. Authorities also discovered that Vincent had had a history of violence against women, which had led them to take a closer look at his alibi. Upon further investigation, surveillance video from the store's checkout counters had shown that Melvin, not Vincent, had made the purchase at that time. When confronted, Melvin revealed that Vincent had told him to make these purchases in Vincent's name. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find any witnesses who had seen Vincent between the evening of July 4th and the evening of July 7th. Both Melvin and his family insisted they had not seen Vincent during this time. Although there was no direct evidence linking Vincent to the murder, police discovered he had some suspicious activities. Vincent had rented a car when he had arrived in Columbus, Ohio, and he had stayed at his brother's house. Police suspected Vincent had flown to Columbus on July 2, 2003 to visit family, then returned to Bakersfield on July 4th, where the tragic incident had occurred on July 6th. He was supposed to return to Ohio on July 7th and had arrived late that evening. Law enforcement had conducted a thorough inspection of the Dodge vehicle, paying special attention to its radiator and air filter. To help identify insects found in the car, investigators had enlisted the expertise of Dr. Lynn Kimsey from the Bohart Museum of Entomology at the University of California, Davis. Dr. Kimsey carefully had analyzed the insects and identified more than 100 species, including several species found only in the western region beyond the Rocky Mountains. The presence of some insects suggested that Vincent had moved at night. By carefully analyzing the insects, Dr. Kimsey had been able to plot a path that showed the car had traveled west from Ohio. Investigators later had tracked down the 5 previous car renters and confirmed that none of them had driven the car to California or near the Rocky Mountains. Police also had examined photographic evidence and found the end of a rubber glove in the laundry room. DNA testing showed a match. It belonged to none other than Vincent Brothers. Detective Watts had discovered that Vincent had been planning to leave town and had begun selling his assets, including putting his house on the market. As a result, Vincent had been arrested on April 30, 2004 and charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in 2007, with prosecutor Lisa Green leading the case. The prosecution argued that Vincent's motive for the murder had been financial, suggesting he had acted out of fear of having to pay child support due to his impending divorce from Joni. The prosecution portrayed Vincent as a serial adulterer who often had disappeared for long periods of time and who could become violent. To support their case, the prosecution called several witnesses, including Dr. Lynn Kimsey, who testified that the insects found in the Dodge were consistent with insects commonly found along Interstate 70. This testimony was further supported by evidence showing 5,424 miles had been driven from July 2 to July 11 in accordance with the prosecution's statement. However, when Melvin had appeared in court, he tried to change his previous testimony, claiming that he had lied to the police about Vincent giving him a credit card to use. In response, the defense presented an expert on high-speed driving, who argued that maintaining an average speed of 70 miles per hour during the trip from Ohio to California had been extremely difficult. The defense also presented its pathologists, who testified that the murders could have occurred as late as Monday morning, July 7, 2003. The defense also had presented interrogation tapes to prove that Melvin had been pressured by police to change his statement. Additionally, they called a witness who claimed to have seen a car accident involving Vincent on Sunday morning, in which a boy on a bicycle had collided with Vincent's rental car at an intersection. Although the incident had not been reported to the police due to the lack of damage or injuries, the prosecution attempted to verify the story. Vincent had taken it upon himself to defend himself. He had strongly denied all accusations about his married life and had firmly denied the accusation of murdering his family. Throughout his testimony, Vincent had become emotional and had shed tears several times. The prosecution had called Carla Tuya, principal of Franklin School, as a witness. She had testified about her past relationship with Vincent, which had begun in 1996 when his son was born and had ended in 2002 when she had decided to end it. Carla revealed a shocking secret that she and Vincent had been intimate just weeks before the family tragedy, directly contradicting Vincent's previous denials about everything. This admission had damaged Vincent's claim to fidelity to his family. The prosecution had argued that the crime had been carefully planned in advance. Thanks to knowing the family's Sunday habits, the murderer had gained an advantage and had had the opportunity to strike. The perpetrator had taken advantage of this and had waited until the whole family was asleep, then had used the spare key to enter the house through the sliding glass door and had killed each family member. On May 15, 2017, Vincent had been found guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder, making him eligible for the death penalty. The jury had reached this decision after hearing testimony from 137 witnesses and deliberating for nearly 2 days. After the verdict, Vincent had been removed from the courtroom and had been returned to the Luro detention facility under tight security. Then, on September 27, 2007, Durham County Superior Court Judge Michael Bush had sentenced Vincent Brothers to death by lethal injection. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown, born in 1979, is an energetic and vibrant woman. She has the ability to spread positive energy to those around her through her optimistic attitude and way of life. People who know her often wonder how she can do so much and still maintain such a positive spirit. But in fact, her positive energy comes from being a mother, a role that she always loves and cherishes. She and her son Noah have a special relationship. Although no one knows about Noah's father, it does not affect their lives. Jennifer became stronger after Noah was diagnosed with autism. She has become a strong support and best friend to her son. The relationship between Jennifer and Noah is known and admired by everyone. They spend a lot of time together, share happy moments and support each other when needed. The small town also loved the family for their cheerfulness and kindness. However, no one could have predicted Jennifer's disappearance. On January 3, 2023, she disappeared without a trace. The next morning, the Limerick Township Police Department received a missing person call from Antonio Blair Watts Richardson, a close friend of Jennifer's. Although it had been less than 24 hours since he last saw or heard her voice, his anxiety was growing. Blair Watts had been trying to contact Jennifer for hours without success. All his attempts went unanswered. This behavior was completely unlike her, as she was a responsible person who always answered calls or messages, especially when it came to matters related to her son Noah. However, on this day, the boy's mother did not come to pick him up after school. This made Jennifer's family and friends very worried, as they knew her to be a caring mother who always cared about her children. This sudden disappearance made everyone feel uneasy. Blair Watts' call to the police was the beginning of a long and mysterious investigation that would later affect the entire city and cause a great tragedy. After Blair Watts reported his girlfriend missing, a major search began. Police, family, and friends joined forces, hoping to find any clues that could shed light on Jennifer's disappearance. Many questions were raised, and the main one was what could have caused this caring mother to abandon her son without any explanation. At 4 p.m. that afternoon, Officer Stephen Crawford of the Limerick Township Police Department arrived at Jennifer's family home to investigate the situation. Upon arrival, Officer Stephen found Jennifer's car still parked on the front porch. Upon entering the home, he discovered that her keys, wallet, and tablet were still inside the home. However, Jennifer's cell phone was nowhere to be found. During further investigation, police discovered that Jennifer's phone had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and had not been located since. The phone's last recorded location was near Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick Township. This discovery was a serious sign in the investigation, suggesting that something terrible might have happened to Jennifer. Young Jennifer Brown is missing and the police have begun an investigation. Investigators have questioned her family, friends, and neighbors, hoping to find information about her disappearance. However, no one has been able to provide useful information. Aunt Diane Bram and Jennifer's friends Tiffany Barron and Blair Watts are convinced that Jennifer would never have left alone. The reason is that she could not leave her son. She was a loving and devoted mother. All efforts by authorities and volunteers have been fruitless. They have not found any trace or clues to Jennifer's whereabouts. Her loved ones have appealed to the public through the media for information about her disappearance. A reward has been offered, but to no avail. Jennifer Brown's disappearance has left both investigators and her family with many questions and concerns. The police investigation has begun to examine every detail of the day she went missing. Blair Watts, the last close friend to see Jennifer alive, has come forward to share her story. On a typical January afternoon, Jennifer and Blair Watts chatted intimately in the warm living room about life, future plans, and their children. The two families' children often played together, and Jennifer asked Blair to pick up Noah from school so they could enjoy the evening together. This was normal for them because they were close friends. However, the next day, when Blair Watts went to pick up Noah from school, things took a strange turn. Noah was behaving erratically and the teachers were worried. They discovered that Noah had missed 2 important doses of medication to help control his illness. Jennifer was a very caring and nurturing mother. So when she did not contact the school about Noah's situation, everyone was surprised. School officials searched for information about Jennifer and discovered that she had left home to go to the grocery store but did not return as scheduled. This was very unlike Jennifer, who was always worried and concerned about her children. This incident made everyone even more worried. Jennifer's friend, Blair Watts, tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. When she did not receive a response, Blair Watts decided to check if Jennifer had picked up her son at the bus stop. However, when Jennifer did not appear, Blair Watts became concerned and decided to report the incident to the police. After the report, no new information about Jennifer's whereabouts emerged. Hopes of her return faded. It seemed that Jennifer had disappeared without a trace. However, on January 18th, 2 weeks after the disappearance was reported, 2 employees working in a warehouse near Roseford discovered a newly dug hole. When they investigated, they discovered the body of a woman buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who went to the burial site. After an autopsy, the police identified the young woman as Jennifer Brown. The sheriff contacted her family and informed them that Jennifer's body had been discovered near a warehouse in Roseford. Jennifer's autopsy revealed that she had died from abuse and asphyxiation. She also had 3 broken ribs, indicating that she had struggled with her attacker before she died. This evidence changed the nature of the investigation, and the missing person case was upgraded to a homicide case. The police began questioning people close to Jennifer, including her family and friends. However, these interviews did not yield any new information, and the police have yet to find a suspect. The investigation seemed to be at a standstill as no new evidence emerged. But surprisingly, the police received important information from Noah's former teacher. After Jennifer was reported missing, the police asked anyone with information to contact them. This call caught the attention of a former teacher of Noah, who decided to come forward to the police. A teacher recalled Jennifer's case, which initially seemed trivial but raised suspicions after the verdict. The teacher said Noah shared with her a key piece of information regarding the incident that occurred on January 4th, the day Jennifer went missing. Noah told her that when Blair Watts picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mother's personal cell phone in Blair Watts' pocket. He immediately recognized the phone because a childhood photo of himself was displayed on the lock screen. This became the key to the investigation into Jennifer's murder. The police had previously assumed that the killer had taken Jennifer's cell phone, but Blair Watts now became the prime suspect. As they delved deeper into the relationship between Jennifer and Blair Watts, hidden secrets began to emerge. This surprised the investigators. On the surface, the relationship between the two seems very close and understanding, and their families also interact frequently. However, when looking closely at the business transactions, the seemingly simple initial relationship turns out to be hidden under a layer of long-standing hatred. In fact, this friendship is closely tied to their business, and that creates unpredictable conflicts. What's more special, people have discovered disputes stemming from that relationship. For example, the breakdown of the business left Blair Watts with emotional conflicts that were difficult to overcome when the Bird's Kitchen store itself was closed in January 2022. After approaching Jennifer, in August 2022, Blair Watts received an offer of help. Jennifer decided to invest in his business to help revive Bird's Kitchen at a new location. Under the agreement, Jennifer would provide financial support to the restaurant every 6 weeks or so. Between August and January, Jennifer transferred $36,000 to Blair Watts to rebuild the business. She also agreed to provide an additional $99,000. However, Blair used the money for her own personal needs instead of investing in the restaurant. When the property owner discovered that Blair Watts had not met her financial obligations, they terminated the lease on December 26, 2022. This left Blair Watts in a desperate situation, losing money and the opportunity to reopen the restaurant. In desperation, Blair decided to commit a serious crime to save her business. During the investigation of Jennifer's case, investigators scrutinized the financial transaction history on her iPad. They discovered 2 illegal transfers of $177,000 to Bird's Kitchen on January 3rd. These payments were not mentioned in the official agreement between Jennifer and Blair Watts. It is worth noting that these transfers initially failed because Jennifer's iPad had two-factor authentication enabled. However, after disabling the authentication system, the transfers were successful. This led investigators to suspect that Jennifer's boyfriend, Blair Watts, may have been involved in the murder. Investigators interviewed the property owners Blair Watts had rented. They discovered that on January 4th, the same day Blair Watts reported Jennifer missing, he came to them to sign the lease, claiming he had the money. Police then conducted an interview with Blair Watts' wife, Tiara Taylor, to determine where Blair Watts had been on the day Jennifer went missing. Tiara said Blair Watts had visited Jennifer's family on January 3rd and did not return home until early the next morning. He returned home briefly, then left around 5 p.m. and did not return home until late in the evening. Further investigation revealed that Blair Watts had stayed at the home of his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, and did not see anyone else until around 8 p.m. This meant that between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., Blair Watts had no evidence to suggest that he was not at the scene of the crime. Based on the available evidence, detectives developed a scenario for the murder. According to this scenario, on January 3rd, Blair Watts went to Jennifer's house around 1 p.m. while Noah was at school and likely killed her. After committing the crime, Blair Watts transferred money from Jennifer's iPad to his account. He then picked up Noah at the bus stop around 4 p.m. When he returned to Jennifer's house, he dropped Noah off and returned to the crime scene to dispose of the body. He took the body to a field near Roseford and buried it in a shallow grave. Blair Watts then went to Tatiana's house and stayed there overnight. However, he made a serious mistake. He let Noah see his mother's cell phone. This was important evidence that helped the police quickly find the killer. Law enforcement had enough evidence to convict, but they decided to investigate further to gather more information. To investigate further, the police requested the participation of film experts and a specially trained dog that could detect the scent of a corpse. First, the dog was brought to Jennifer's house to memorize the woman's scent. The police then led the dog to Blair Watts' car and it immediately detected a foul odor. This was the final key piece of evidence that solidified detectives' belief that Blair Watts was involved in the murder. On February 8, after months of investigation, Blair Watts was arrested and charged with aggravated murder, and burglary. He is currently being held in the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing. When Jennifer's friends and family found out she was dead, they were shocked and heartbroken. But what made them even more heartbroken was that the killer was someone they knew and trusted. Now that Blair Watts has been arrested and brought to trial, they can finally rest easy knowing that justice has been served. Tiffany Barron, a friend of Jennifer's, spoke on behalf of the family. In an interview, she expressed her feelings. She still dreams about Jennifer. Jennifer's son, Noah, keeps asking about his mother and she doesn't know how to answer. If Blair Watts is convicted after the investigation and trial, he will spend the rest of his life in prison. The case was solved thanks to the keen observation of Jennifer's 8-year-old son. He discovered Blair Watts' mistake, helped solve the case and punish the culprit. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Petit family. The Petit family was viewed as a model family due to their stable economic background and well-behaved children, earning them genuine admiration from those around them. William Petit, the father, was a standout athlete in high school, particularly in basketball, where he demonstrated natural leadership skills. He was also the top student in his class, going on to earn a law degree from Dartmouth University. However, William's true passion lay in helping others, caring for the sick, and making a positive impact on the social. After completing his law degree, he decided to pursue a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. It was during his third year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh that William met Jennifer Hawk, a nurse specializing in oncology and co-director of the Health Center for a pre-graduate internship program. They fell deeply in love, with those who knew them confirming that they were perfectly suited for each other. The couple got married in 1985. 4 years later, they had their first daughter, Haley. Her birth inspired them to have a large family, which prompted them to purchase a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. Following childbirth, Jennifer resumed her work as a nurse and internship co-director. However, she was later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic disease with no cure that would follow her for the rest of her life. Her family remained supportive throughout. At 10 years old, Haley started raising money for the Multiple Sclerosis Society, generating significant funds over time. Michaela also performed well academically. And when Haley went to college, Michaela planned to take over the fundraising efforts so she could continue supporting their community. The summer before, Michaela had learned to cook and she enjoyed preparing meals for her family. Tragically, this daily activity leads the family to an encounter with a criminal. One July evening in 2007, Michaela was preparing dinner, but she needed additional ingredients. She and her mother went to the nearest market, where they coincidentally encountered Joshua Komisarjevsky, a man recently released from prison. Joshua had experienced a traumatic and complicated childhood. He was born to teenage parents. He was put up for adoption a week after birth and adopted by the Komisarjevsky family, renowned artists in Europe known for their strict and religious upbringing. Joshua had a high IQ, but struggled in school, prompting his parents to decide that homeschooling was a better option. During his trial, Joshua revealed that he had been sexually abused by a cousin in his childhood, but his family chose not to address the issue. This traumatic experience contributed to the development of his rebellious personality. At the age of 14, Joshua was accused of abusing his sister. Around the same time, he committed his first burglary. In 2002, he was arrested for 18 charges of burglary and resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. During the trial, he gave a chilling confession, revealing that he enjoyed invading other people's private space, enjoyed the feeling of being close to them while they slept, and found particular satisfaction in making others feel insecure. Released on parole in 2007 at the age of 27, officials deemed Joshua a danger to society, describing him as a perverted individual and disturbing behavior. Despite these warnings, the jury declared him fit for release. Following his release, Joshua stayed in a residence for ex-convicts, where he met his accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had spent a significant portion of his life in prison, starting with his first incarceration at the age of 16 in 1980. He was frequently arrested for violent robbery and burglary, and after being sentenced in 2004, he was granted parole in 2006, which led him to the same halfway house where he met Joshua. On July 22, 2007, Joshua trailed Michaela Petit and her mother as they traveled to a nearby market to purchase. He paid close attention to and noted specific details about Michaela's vehicle, facial features, and blonde hair. After completing their shopping, Michaela and her mother returned home, having no knowledge that Joshua had been following them. Later, Hayes sent Joshua a text message indicating he was impatient to start and needed a drink soon. Hayes asked if their plan was still on, to which Joshua confirmed to be yes. When Hayes asked how much longer he had to wait, Joshua told him he was busy putting his child to bed and advised Hayes to be patient. Hayes responded by expressing his eagerness to proceed. Meanwhile, Joshua secretly follows the Petit family in his car to find out the exact location of their house. The whole family was enjoying a nice dinner together, but they unaware that it would be the last time they would all be together. Later that night, while everyone was asleep except for William Petit, who had dozed off in the living room, their peace was disrupted by strange noises inside the house. William remembered feeling groggy, in pain, and unable to think clearly. Joshua and Hayes had entered the house through an unlocked door, initially planning to rob the family. However, upon finding a baseball bat, they used it to brutally beat William, who remained conscious despite the assault. One of the intruders threatened to shoot him if he moved. William was then restrained with ropes, tied to a pole in the basement. Joshua and Haley proceeded upstairs to Haley's room, where they found her sleeping. They tied Haley and Michaela to their bedposts, covering their heads with pillowcases. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Jennifer Petit had fallen asleep, but was soon woken up by Joshua and Hayes. They controlled Jennifer by tying her hands and feet, feeling that they now had control of the house. Joshua and Hayes then took their time to thoroughly inspect the house, and even stopped to smoke cigarettes in the living room. After collecting valuables such as jewelry, cash, Joshua and Hayes decided it was time to leave. It seemed the Petit family's ordeal was finally over as they heard the burglars leave the house. However, their nightmare was far from over. Joshua and Hayes sold the items at a pawn shop, but after realizing they hadn't made as much money as they expected, their greed drove them to return to the house. When they returned to the Petit house, they discovered a check register with $40,000 and decided to steal a total of $155,000. Once back, they informed Jennifer of their plan, threatening to kill her entire family if she didn't comply. Desperate and prioritizing her daughter's safety, Jennifer reluctantly agreed to accompany Hayes to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua took advantage of Jennifer's absence to enter Michaela's room. He untied Michaela, undressed her, and took photos with his cell phone. He assaulted her, recording the act. Afterward, Joshua took her to the bathroom to clean her, aiming to eliminate any DNA evidence. He ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. The evidence that Joshua raped Michaela was found during her autopsy. State Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver discovered Joshua's DNA in Michaela's body. At the bank, everything initially seemed to go smoothly. However, Hayes failed to notice Jennifer's actions while she was in line. Before approaching the teller, Jennifer wrote a note on a flyer asking for help. The note read that her name was Jennifer Petit, she needed to withdraw $115,000 from her savings account, and that her family was in danger, so Jennifer asked them to call the police, or her family would be killed. The teller gave Jennifer the money despite her lack of identification. With the cash, Jennifer left the bank and returned to the car with Hayes. The bank employee immediately called the police to report the incident. However, the manager told the 911 dispatcher that Jennifer had indicated the home invaders were being nice and only wanted money. Cheshire police received a report from the bank and they set up a vehicle perimeter around the area without alerting the suspect. From a distance, the police observed the situation without intervening. Meanwhile, back at the house, Joshua told his accomplice about his actions towards Michaela, implying that he could easily harm Jennifer as well. Hayes then grabbed Jennifer, pinned her to the ground, and started removing her clothes. William heard his wife being assaulted upstairs and managed to flee. One of the intruders responded, "Don't worry, it's all going to be over in a couple of minutes." William crawled to the basement stairs and eventually made it to the backyard. William thought the intruders would shoot them all soon, so he knew he had to act fast. Joshua checked on William but found he had escaped. According to Hayes' confession, Joshua told Hayes that William had gotten away while Hayes was raping Jennifer in the living room. Upon hearing this, Hayes strangled Jennifer to death while continuing to assault her. Shortly after, they heard William shouting for help. A neighbor, who initially didn't recognize William due to his injuries, immediately called 911. Realizing the police would arrive soon, Joshua and Hayes tried to eliminate evidence. Hayes and Joshua doused Jennifer's lifeless body, various parts of the house including Michaela and Haley's bedroom, and also Michaela and Haley themselves with gasoline. Hayes and Joshua started a fire at the scene, unaware that the police had blocked off the area just a few miles away. Within 5 minutes, they collided with a police vehicle and were surrounded by officers. The two perpetrators, Joshua and Hayes, who were later identified as ex-convicts, were pulled from their vehicle and arrested. Meanwhile, the fire at the house was spreading rapidly. An ambulance arrived and took William Petit, was seriously injured, to the nearest hospital. Firefighters soon followed and attempted to put out the blaze. Once the fire was extinguished, they discovered a horrific scene inside the house. The first body they found was Jennifer's, which was badly charred and had rope around her ankles. On the second floor, they found Michaela tied to her bed. Her body completely consumed by the fire. In a desperate bid to escape, Haley had managed to break free restraints but collapsed just a few meters away due to smoke inhalation. William had also managed to free himself and crawled to a neighbor's yard for help, but the neighbor didn't initially recognize him due to the severity of his injuries. Both Joshua and Hayes admitted to the murders during questioning. Detectives noticed that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout her interrogation. However, each attacker claimed the other was the main person responsible for planning the home invasion. Joshua also accused William of being responsible for the murders. In his diary, Joshua referred to William as a coward, stating that William had the opportunity to save his family but chose not to. The trial of Hayes started on September 13, 2010, with a jury of 12 people, consisting of 7 women and 5 men. The defense team argued that Joshua was the mastermind behind the crime and was responsible for making it more brutal. On the other hand, the prosecutors believed that both Hayes and Joshua were equally responsible. After about 5 hours of discussion, the jury found Hayes guilty on October 5th. The sentencing phase began on October 18th, but the jury was initially torn between recommending life imprisonment or the death penalty. Hayes' defense team argued that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. However, on November 8th, the jury decided to recommend the death sentence for Hayes. Before the trial, Hayes had tried to negotiate a plea bargain for a life sentence, but the prosecutors wanted the death penalty. On December 2, 2010, Hayes apologized for the pain he caused the Petit family. He stated that death would be a welcome relief and hoped it would bring some peace to those he hurt. Judge John Blues sentenced Hayes to 6 death sentences and 106 additional years for other crimes. However, when Connecticut abolished capital punishment in 2015, Hayes' death sentence was changed to life imprisonment. The trial of Joshua Komisarjevsky began on September 19, 2011. His lawyers offered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty. They argued that Hayes was the one who directed Joshua. Joshua was found guilty on October 13, 2011, and the jury recommended the death penalty on December 9, 2011. During Joshua's sentencing, he expressed remorse and shame for the crime, claiming he never intended to kill anyone. The judge set an execution date of July 20, 2012, holding Joshua accountable for his actions. However, in August 2015, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment after Connecticut abolished capital punishment. William Petit, the lone survivor of his family, was released from the hospital after 4 days. Upon his discharge, he immediately attended the funeral service for his wife and daughters. Overwhelmed with guilt and grief, William struggled to come to terms with the devastating reality that his loved ones were truly gone forever. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Xavier Dupont de Ligons. Xavier Dupont de Ligons, born March 9, 1961. He is the eldest son of the French Count Bernard Hubert Dupont de Lignes and his wife, Geneviève. Xavier had a younger sister named Christine. Xavier's parents were very wealthy. Xavier's mother, Geneviève, claimed to have received messages from the divine, which she wrote down during her creative writing sessions. Her strange beliefs developed into teachings about the impending apocalypse, and she founded a religious sect called the Church of Philadelphia. The group consisted of members of the aristocracy, whom Geneviève believed would survive the apocalypse and participate in the renewal of the world. Despite his father's aristocratic title, Xavier had little interest in the French tradition. Instead, he was fascinated by luxury, high-end cars, and Xavier loved the United States. Xavier's lavish lifestyle was financed by his mother through substantial donations from members of the sect, who vowed to keep their activities secret. In 1974, Xavier met Emmanuel Teneur on the beautiful island of Bra. They formed a friendship based on mutual understanding and respect. It is said that at that time, Emmanuel confessed his feelings to Xavier, but despite his rejection, their close friendship remained unchanged. 2 years later, Xavier met Agnes Hodanger in Neuilly-sur-Seine, a suburb of Paris. Agnes was born on November 9, 1962, and Agnes was deeply religious. She worked as an assistant at the Blanche de Caze Catholic School in Nantes, where she taught catechism. Although information about Agnes' family is not widely available, there are many sources that indicate that Xavier and Agnes formed a very close relationship. The relationship developed into a short-lived romance before they decided to separate. In 1990, Agnes gave birth to her first child, Arthur, from a non-coercive relationship. Soon after, she and Xavier got back together, rekindled their love, and decided to marry. Xavier adopted Arthur as his son. 2 years after the breakup, they welcomed the birth of their second son, Thomas, who was considered the heir to the family. To commemorate this important event, Xavier chose Emmanuel as the first person to support Thomas. After Thomas, the couple had 2 more children, Anna and Benoit. The family of 6 lived happily. Xavier showed himself to be a loving father and his children excelled in school, opening up a promising future. Agnes passed on her faith to her children and took them to church. Around 2000, in accordance with their interests and wishes, Xavier moved his family to the United States. Xavier, a reserved, charismatic, and multilingual man, believed he could easily integrate into the United States. However, this project failed, resulting in significant financial loss. Upon returning to France, Xavier was left in a large amount of debt after several failed business ventures. Xavier was described as a salesman in some investigations. According to French media reports, financial problems had been a major concern for Xavier for many years. One of Xavier's failed projects was the importation of plans from the United States into French. In addition, Xavier also started a small business but found only limited success. These businesses included hotel and restaurant guides for sales representatives, a loyalty system for restaurants, and an association called the French Federation of Commerce. Xavier was also listed as the manager of another business that has not been clearly disclosed. Eventually, the business's accounts were few, and by 2003, Xavier had hired 6 sales staff. Xavier's work was often Monday through Friday and brought in less than $4,200 in reported annual income. The mounting financial problems began to strain Xavier's marriage, perhaps due to the usual disagreements in marriage. In 2004, Agnes wrote on a French forum about the challenges she and her husband faced, notably that Xavier had told her that the collective death of the entire family would not be a disaster. The financial situation worsened, and by 2009, the mounting debt had taken a serious toll on their relationship, forcing them to temporarily separate. During this time, Xavier sent Agnes several letters blaming her for the family's difficulties and the debts they were facing. This emotional stress affected Agnes, causing her to lose her sense of direction and suffer from insomnia. During this difficult time, Xavier sought help from his friend Emmanuel, who came from a wealthy family and had inherited a fortune from his father. Emmanuel was always ready to help Xavier financially. Emmanuel not only lent Xavier money, but also financed his trips and co-signed the purchase of a house. With Emmanuel's help, the Xavier family lived in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Nantes in the late 2000s. However, after settling down, the neighbors found Agnes to be stubborn and not easily put up with her husband. But behind closed doors, Agnes faced personal problems. She felt Xavier was too slow and unloving, and sometimes even abusive towards Agnes. She was also frightened by the way Genevieve, her mother-in-law, controlled Xavier. She described Genevieve as a mentally ill mystic and was extremely fearful. On January 20th, 2011, Xavier's father Bernard died. Xavier hoped that his father's death would result in an inheritance, which would help him solve his financial problems. However, Xavier was shocked. When he went through his father's possessions, he found nothing of significance. The remaining items included a few pieces of paper, a rifle, a name tag, a ring, and some cash, which Xavier promptly took. A few hours after his father's death, Xavier withdrew cash using his father's card. On February 2nd, he obtained a gun license, and on March 12th, he purchased a silencer for his rifle. During this time, he practiced shooting a rifle in the garden, looking at a balloon on a support stand. Emmanuel visited and tried shooting, finding nothing unusual. Xavier explained that the silencer was to avoid disturbing the neighbors. On Friday, April 1st, Xavier and Emmanuel went to a shooting range together, where Xavier's rifle was the focus of attention. The next day, Emmanuel called Xavier 5 times and they talked for almost an hour. Sunday, April 3rd. That night, Xavier, Agnes, and their children watched a movie and had a nice dinner at a restaurant. Everyone in the family was there, except Thomas, who was studying at a Catholic school and living in a nearby dormitory. After the outing, the family returned home and were seen by neighbors. Some family members also exchanged text messages with friends and acquaintances. That night, Xavier used drugs to put his wife and children to sleep, then shot and buried them in the garden. He did the same thing with the family's Labrador. Xavier called Agnes's workplace and said she was sick. He then contacted Arthur's school and said Arthur had been in a motorbike accident. He then contacted Anne and Benoit's school and said they were sick. In the afternoon, Xavier sent a letter to the restaurant where Thomas worked, saying that Thomas would resign because his father had been transferred to Australia. However, Xavier still had to deal with Thomas. On Monday, April 4th, Xavier contacted Thomas and had dinner with him at a restaurant near Thomas's university dormitory. After the meal, Thomas returned to his room exhausted. The next day, Thomas received an urgent text message from his father, saying that Agnes had been in a bicycle accident and was in a coma at the hospital, prompting Thomas to go to Nantes immediately. At midnight, a friend of Thomas's received a text message from him, saying that he was at home watching a movie with his father. Thomas was probably dead by then. About an hour later, Xavier emailed Emmanuel, arranging to meet up soon. Emmanuel responded, reminding Xavier that he had the power of attorney and the keys on the boat. Xavier went in and out of his house and even left a note on the door asking for no more mail to be delivered. Xavier then withdrew cash from an ATM, which was captured on security cameras. He paid with credit cards at restaurants and stayed at hotels under his real name. As Xavier's perfect escape began, the neighbors began to notice worrying signs. The once open windows of the bungalow had been boarded up for days. The 4 children of the Xavier family were no longer seen playing outside. The dogs were no longer heard barking, and Agnes was nowhere to be seen. All disappeared without a trace. Concerned neighbors began investigating and contacted the police. When police arrived, they discovered a nearly empty refrigerator with only a few jars of jam left. In the kitchen, a mop still had food on it, and a ring was placed on the living room table. Guitars were on the sofa, but no one was home. Police found empty picture frames, and the closet was empty of clothes. In the midst of the mystery, on April 9th, a letter appeared, sent to Xavier's family and friends. The letter claimed that Xavier had been hired by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and that the family had gone undercover as part of a witness protection program, explaining why they had suddenly disappeared and had not communicated. Suspicion and concern grew among neighbors who sensed something was amiss. Fearing for the family's lives, they urged the police to investigate further. As the case gained media attention, more details emerged. On April 15th, security cameras captured Xavier entering a small hotel near Cannes. He parked his car, picked up a bag, and disappeared into nearby woods. This was the last time he was seen. Police returned to the family home Xavier on April 21, 2011. There, they discovered a new plot of land under the terrace. When they dug, police found the bodies of Agnes and her 4 children. Each had been shot 2 to 3 times and were wrapped in bags, covered with religious symbols, and carefully buried in sacks of quicklime. The family's 2 Labrador retrievers were also found buried. Despite a thorough search, no traces of blood, fingerprints, or DNA were found. Xavier became the most widely circulated person in France because of his alleged murder. His image appeared on every news bulletin. However, it seems that Xavier has mysteriously disappeared from the face of the earth. Autopsy results of 5 victims showed most of the bullets were shot in the head. In addition, traces of sedatives were found in the bodies of the children, which confirmed the hypothesis that they attacked while they were sleeping. A remarkable detail began to appear around Agnes. In the master bedroom, police discovered a device that Agnes used to control her sleep apnea, which had stopped working at 3:27 a.m. on April 4th. Because of the close relationship between Xavier and Emmanuel was called in for questioning by the police. Emmanuel cooperated with initial investigations. When Emmanuel was questioned about the exported rifle, Emmanuel initially knew about it. However, upon further investigation, the police discovered many inconsistencies in Emmanuel's testimony. They soon realized that Emmanuel was not being completely truthful. A crucial step occurred 24 hours later. Just before noon, Nantes police raided Emmanuel's apartment and seized Emmanuel's laptop. Emmanuel then revealed the real information about Xavier's export rifle. Xavier's mother Genevieve also attracted the attention of the police during their interviews. Genevieve was evasive and denied any knowledge of the Philadelphia church. The police investigation was fruitful. They discovered a copy of a complaint filed years ago by former members of the cult who fled in fear after Genevieve offered to have sex with all the men to conceive. This revelation about the cult, including the wealthy members who provided financial support, led the police to believe that this environment may have provided Xavier with material support. As a result, all former members of the Philadelphia church were questioned, and the police monitored the cult members, hoping to detect any indiscretions in conversations or emails. When the police examined the computer hard drive, they discovered many email exchanges between Emmanuel and Xavier. Some of the emails were particularly revealing about the relationship between the two. One email sent in the early morning of April 6 attracted special attention from the police. These accumulated details led investigators to the crime in which Emmanuel may have assisted Xavier in his escape. However, the police team's work has yielded results. They discovered a copy of a petition obtained years ago by former members of the sect. These people fled in fear after Christine offered to have sex with all the men to identify the chosen tie. The important revelation about this sect, including the wealthy members who provided the main financial support, has helped investigators better understand the work. They believe that this environment may have provided Xavier with the necessary support and substance. Therefore, all former members of the Philadelphia church were examined and followers of the sect were followed, hoping to find connections through conversations or emails. Despite efforts, no murder weapon was found. Xavier's cell phone records helped police track his movements in the country. Xavier's last known trace was recorded on April 15 from a security log. Based on the type of bag Xavier was carrying, police suspected that he may have been carrying a weapon. While everything suggested that Xavier might have committed suicide in the forest, the police conducted a thorough search of the dense forest, but without any results. This led to the hypothesis that Xavier might have sailed the boat to another country. Therefore, an international arrest warrant was issued on May 4. The Nantes police contacted the National Fisheries Monitoring Center to verify whether Emmanuel or Xavier owned a motorboat or a sailboat. The police did not find sufficient information, but Emmanuel was summoned to the Nantes police station for further questioning. When the police asked Emmanuel about the sailboat, Emmanuel claimed it was a coincidence. Emmanuel explained that Emmanuel had given Explorer permission to open his safe in case anything happened to Emmanuel, and that the key to the safe was hidden in a model sailboat in an apartment. According to Emmanuel, the safe contained Emmanuel's will. Despite some suspicious coincidences, the police released Emmanuel. At this point, Emmanuel was only considered a witness. However, the police decided to put pressure on Emmanuel because they suspected that Emmanuel was a possible accomplice. A key discovery was made when police examined all the checks paid to Xavier's company. A $4,200 check signed by Emmanuel, linked to a previously undisclosed bank account in Monaco. Police quickly requested account records, but due to Monaco's strict banking secrecy laws, they would only respond to requests from their own regulators. On September 28, 4 police officers returned to Emmanuel's home. After a long wait, Emmanuel showed up. Emmanuel's apartment was sparsely furnished, with empty liquor bottles scattered around, suggesting that Emmanuel lived a very isolated life. Emmanuel told the police that Emmanuel had not received any letters or phone calls from Xavier. In 2015, a journalist claimed to have received a letter from Xavier stating he was alive. However, after conducting handwriting, DNA, and fingerprint analyses, the letter did not provide any new information. A tip-off about a monk resembling Xavier led police to raid a monastery in Rab-Brun-sur-Aran on January 9, 2018. After a thorough 2-hour search, they concluded it was a case of mistaken identity. Then, on January 18, 2019, Emmanuel died of a heart attack. That same year, authorities arrested a man they believed to be Xavier at Glasgow Airport in Scotland, only to discover it was a case of mistaken identity. Speculation has it that Xavier may be hiding in South America, specifically Argentina, where Xavier can help him avoid being noticed. Despite the passing of the years, the Church of Philadelphia still exists, with members who have been part of the church for nearly 40 years, living in seclusion from the world. Since 2011, the case has been shrouded in rumors and speculation, causing it to stall. Ultimately, Xavier was never found. The perpetrators responsible for the deaths of Agnes and her 4 children have still not been found.